Looks like the first place really will be decided between these two. Arcane Wizardry, Peak Master Antero laughed with interest. Colleen Evil Peak's Master Bisma swept a glance at the Blood Slaughterer Peak Master Terror and remarked, having competition is good. If Drake was the only one in the running with no one to fight him, this peak selection ceremony would be boring. Over the years, Blood Slaughterer Peak had constantly used all kinds of means to get their hands on highly talented disciples, making them grow stronger and stronger. Although this was done with Supreme Leader's approval, Bisma did not feel comfortable about it. She felt that Terror's actions were disrupting Spirit Devouring Mountain's atmosphere. A face as fair as jade, the youthful-looking Terror smiled slightly and said, Ezra's martial spirit is not weak, and should have some tricks up his sleeve. However, I'm still more optimistic about Drake's chances. His spiritual energy cultivation far surpasses his opponent, is from the Tubble clan, and has very stable and solid foundations. He is not to be underestimated. His gaze suddenly swept towards Ravina's figure as he frowned slightly, without anyone noticing. Didn't Drake admire Ravina? Wasn't their relationship supposed to be good? Why had Ravina chosen to help Ezra instead in last 3 months? The attitude she displayed towards Drake did not look as if she had a good opinion of him. Under the attention of countless gazes, on the golden stone platform, Drake's gaze grew increasingly icy as he stared at Ezra, the former's glare as sharp as the edge of a blade. He did not waste his breath speaking, because he could no longer be bothered to say anything. The thing he wanted to do the most now was to crush Ezra's face under his foot. Only doing so would he be able to release the pent-up rage in his heart. How dare a peasant like you to have designs on the woman I've taken a fancy to? Drake's 5 fingers abruptly clenched tightly as dark green spiritual energy erupted from his body without reservation. His spiritual energy turned into a several 100 feet wide green hurricanes that violently raged around him. The martial prowess displayed by Drake Tubble had already reached the peak of the 4th level core formation stage, far surpassing all the other Outer Mountain disciples. Spiritual energy pressure spread, sweeping towards Ezra Zephyr. The prince stared at Drake with a mocking smile. He could feel the spiritual pressure pulsing from the latter's body. The latter was after all a peak 4th level core formation expert. The spiritual energy around Drake's body grew increasingly vigorous, the iciness in his gaze finally peaking as word after word was spat out from his mouth in a chilling voice. Ezra. SWIISSSHH. The instant the last word was said, Drake Tubble's body seemed to turn into a series of afterimages as he abruptly shot forth, a fist brutally punching the prince. Dark green spiritual energy swirled around the fist, like a howling tornado that caused even the golden ground below to crack. Even a 3rd level core formation practitioner would immediately be heavily injured if hit by this punch. Drake had made full advantage of his peak 4th level core formation strength. The fist rapidly enlarged in Ezra's eyes. His body shook faintly as mists appeared, while his body was fully etherealized. Gossamer form. His figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Boom. Drake's punch landed on empty air, the space rippling due to its power. Drake Tubble's expression was eerily cold as his body shot forth once again. A few dozen feet away, Ezra's body had just revealed itself when the sharp sound of rushing wind followed like a shadow. Swish swish. 2 figures seemed to teleport on the giant golden stone platform, the piercing sound of rushing wind continuously ringing in the area. They were so quick that several people were dazzled by their speed. However, from what everyone could see, Drake was fully in control of the battle. His attacks were swift and ferocious like a storm, ceaselessly trying to engulf Ezra Zephyr, causing him to retreat time and time again. Although the gossamer steps made him extremely fast, Drake's spiritual energy was also able to enhance his speed, making him just that tiny bit slower than the prince. There were many instances where Ezra seemed to narrowly dodge by a hair's breadth, making the onlookers' hearts jump in their bodies. On 10,000 stone platforms, some of the disciples whose battles had already ended lifted their heads, their expressions changing as they watched the battle on the golden stone platform. They would likely not last even 10 rounds if they were in Ezra's place, before being effortlessly defeated by Drake's torrent of attacks. Boom. Drake's punch blasted empty air again, his vigorous spiritual energy making space itself tremble. A sharp force pierced through space, landing on Ezra's body. However, the latter's etherealized body merely shook slightly, neutralizing the force. His figure borrowed its momentum to fly even further away, his nimbleness hitting the extreme. Drake's expression was coldly indifferent as he frostily said, "Do you only know how to dodge like a rabbit?" However, his words did not affect Ezra Zephyr. He made speed his weapon, and though Drake's attacks were swift and powerful, it would take a toll on his body if he continued. To abandon one's advantage after a single provocation from the opponent was something only an idiot would do. Drake's eyes hardened when he saw that Ezra Zephyr was ignoring him. "It seems that you believe I have no way to deal with that. I've said this before, no matter how fast you run, you're only a rabbit. Your gossamer form technique is no threat to me at all. Watch how I break your gossamer form." Drake's hands abruptly came together, and a mocking smile rose from the corners of his lips as a chilling voice sounded. "Gamma layer skill, Gale C." In that instant, Ezra Zephyr suddenly felt all the wind in the area sweep over, covering every inch of the stone platform. Space rippled faintly as the wind began to take on the shape of countless wind blades. The wind blades came together, forming a sea of blades. Ezra Zephyr's figure stood at the center of the sea, a slightly grave look appearing on his face. Drake was capable indeed. This method had directly sealed off his speed advantage. "Ezra, I will show you the gap between us." Drake's gaze was akin to the edge of a blade as his hand abruptly clenched. BBIIZZZZ. Countless dark green wind blades vibrated. A split second later, they seemed to cover the entire sky as they shot forward, engulfing Ezra, who had no place to hide. Alarm and shock filled every gaze in the area. Drake was indeed a formidable individual. BIIZZZ. Green wind blades seemed to form a sea as they engulfed every corner of the golden stone platform. The innumerable vibrating wind blades flickered with an icy light, a sight that made one's heart shiver inside. In a brief moment, Drake had displayed an impressive tactic, showing that his title as the number one amongst the 10 great Outer Mountain disciples was not just for show. Gazes that could fill the sky converged on the spot where Ezra Zephyr had been in the sea of wind blades as everyone wiped the sweat off their foreheads. "Kill." A chilling light glowed in Drake's eyes. Without any hesitation, his hand closed as a sky full of wind blades shuddered. With a howl, all of them shot towards Ezra Zephyr's location. "No matter how fast you are, you can't escape from the range of my wind blade sea." Ezra also seemed to understand that he would not be able to avoid this. Hence, his body did not move from the stop, merely concentrating on the wind blades that were zooming towards him. Every wind blade contained deadly spiritual energy. Let's not mention the third-level core formation expert, even an ordinary fourth-level core formation would be pierced full of holes. As the one who was trapped deep inside this sea of wind blades, Ezra Zephyr's situation was far from reassuring. Under the attention of countless gazes, the sea of green wind blades arrived at their destination, drowning Ezra Zephyr's figure in a few brief moments. Che. A piercing noise stealthily sounded as the golden ground was riddled full of holes. A sea of wind blades swept forth, tirelessly unleashing a torrent of attacks. It was a long while later, before the sea of wind blades finally stopped their assault. Every single gaze in the area immediately looked over, only to see Ezra Zephyr's figure standing on the exact same spot. A cold smile was revealed on Drake's face. To forcibly endure his attack, let alone a second-level core formation like Ezra, even a fourth-level expert would be gravely injured. However, just as the smile on his face was widening, it suddenly froze slightly when his gaze looked to the front. The leader of Naren stood there, his gossamer body covered in purplish gold scales that protected him. On the purplish gold scale armor, lightning flickered. It was the power of dragon pelt. The purplish gold scales were clean, there was not a single scale that was damaged. The sea of gale blades had failed to break through his layers of defenses. An uproar began to spread in the area. No one had expected Ezra to so easily withstand the attack that was powerful enough to seriously injure a 4th-level core formation stage. On the spiritual energy tree, Peak Master Antero nodded and said, "Not bad, that should be the Gossamer Steps technique. Reaching this level in a short 3 months really shows his talent." The Divine Demon Peak's Master Franco's voice was akin to a clap of thunder. "Those purplish gold scales seem to be a type of formidable body strengthening technique. This kid is suited to walk the path of body tempering." The miserably looking white-brow Master Aksama from the Heavenly Fiend Peak shook his head and said, "Although the purplish gold scales have decent defensive capabilities, the main reason why the kid was able to block Drake's Gale C technique was the unshakable mental and spiritual power of his. That's why I feel that psychic prowess is stronger than body tempering techniques. The latter will easily result in the body growing too powerful, making one stupid." Franco's eyes widened in a glare as he angrily said, "Old White, no matter how much bullshit you spout, your shitty illusion prowess will still be a path one takes when every other option has been exhausted. How can it possibly compare to body tempering?" The white-brow Aksama shook his head and sighed. "Like playing the lute to a cow, simpleton." The Colleen Evil Peak Master Bisma looked towards Master Terror and said, "It seems that it will not be so easy for Drake Tubble to become champion." The Blood Slaughterer Peak Master Terror merely displayed a kindly smile as he replied, "You are mistaken, Peak Master Bisma. Drake had merely been probing his opponent earlier. If Ezra was unable to even deal with such attacks, he would really be a little too weak. Drake has held the initiative from start to end. The fact that Ezra can last so long with his 2nd-level core formation strength is already very impressive, but it will be very difficult for him to stop Drake." Bisma smiled faintly and said, "We shall watch and see." On the 7th branch, the expressionless Elder of Alchemic Rune Peak did not dare to interject into the conversation between the Peak Masters. However, his mouth curled slightly. In his opinion, Drake was sure to win this battle, and Ezra's resistance was ultimately akin to a mantis trying to block a cart. On the golden stone platform, Drake's expression darkened slightly as he gazed at Ezra Zephyr, who had managed to withstand his wind blades. The former's eyes grew even colder as he nonchalantly said, "Ezra, you do have some ability." He had originally believed the prince would be injured by his technique, but it looks like he had miscalculated. Evidently, he had still underestimated Ezra's strength. Although the latter was only at the 2nd-level core formation stage, he had numerous tricks up his sleeve, making it hard for anyone to pin down. The purplish gold scales on Ezra's body gleamed. He did not intend to reply, as a similarly icy light flashed in his eyes. His foot slammed into the ground, and his gossamer body disappeared from the spot. A split second later, he appeared in front of Drake Tubble, a fist covered in purplish gold scales blasting towards the latter along with thundering black and red lightning. He had begun his counterattack. "Oh? Finally dare to face me directly?" Mockery rose from the corners of Drake's mouth when he saw this. He did not back down, a fist also flying forward, a spiritual energy tore through the air. BHAM, BHAM, BHAM. The two exchanged dozens of blows in an instant, each attack ruthlessly aimed at the other's fatal spots. Although Ezra Zephyr's attacks were ferocious, all of them were blocked by Drake. The advantage of being a 4th-level core formation stage meant that his spiritual energy was much stronger than Ezra Zephyr's. Drake Tubble mocked through the lightning-quick exchange of blows, "Is this all your attacks amount to?" He swung his palm as he sneered, squarely hitting Ezra Zephyr's fist shadow. The spiritual energy in Drake's body flooded out, slapping the prince's fist shadow away. Fa. However, the moment Ezra Zephyr's fist shadow was scattered, his right hand came swinging through, and an alarming amount of spiritual energy suddenly converged towards the center of his palm. The spiritual energy transformed into a glowing big twinkling ball, swirling with wind and light, berserk undulations violently pulsing outwards. "I think you should take a look at glittering wind and light." A deep voice echoed in Ezra Zephyr's heart. Drake Tubble's pupils violently shrank. Ezra's true attack had been hidden under his numerous fist shadows, the earlier attacks merely a distraction. The wind and light ball rapidly enlarged in Drake's eyes. However, Drake was no ordinary individual after all. At this perilous moment, he suddenly sucked in a deep breath as his cheeks rapidly ballooned, before blowing out a stream of green spiritual energy. Green glowing force nail, the green spiritual energy transformed into a thin shadow that shot forth at an alarming speed. In a flash, it smashed into the glittering wind and light ball. Boom! A violent shockwave unfurled, sweeping the prince and Drake Tubble away. Their feet smeared across the ground, leaving behind long skid marks, while they stabilized their bodies. Drake's expression had grown even uglier. He had nearly been caught in Ezra's sneaky attack earlier, forcing him to reveal one of his hidden trump cards. One should know that the green glow force nail was a low-tier gamma layer spiritual technique. It was made from condensed spiritual energy and possessed astonishing power. If used at the right moment, it could even bring about a reversal. However, it needed to be refined in advance and had now been forced out by the werewolf prince. The prince's expression changed slightly, not because he had failed to injure Drake, but because the latter was still hiding such a card up his sleeve. The green shadow from before was way too quick, and the prince would likely be struck if he was not guarding against it. Fortunately, he was now prepared for it. Drake's murderous gaze looked towards Ezra as he suddenly shook his head and said, "It seems that I have underestimated you. As such, don't blame me for bullying you because of your weak and poor background." Ezra's brows knitted together as vigilance appeared in his eyes. Drake let out an icy chuckle. With a deep breath, his hands abruptly began to form a series of seals. Green light immediately dashed into the sky from the top of his head, the earth-shaking cry of a sword ringing from within. Just like an eagle's cry. Countless gazes converged towards the spot and saw a long green sword within the green light. Piercing rays of light exploded from the sword as an astonishing aura unfurled. The eyes of innumerable disciples abruptly widened at this moment, as cries of shock and horror began to sound one after another. "That is a special tier weapon?" Green light whizzed out from the top of Drake's head. Inside the light, a green sword released a loud and clear sword cry. A formidable pressure spread from the sword. Countless gazes looked over in horror and shock, seeing the ancient patterns that had been carved onto the sword. Green light swirled around it, giving off an aura of mystery. The handle of the sword was covered in green feathers, making it appear similar to a soaring green eagle. This green eagle sword had clearly a level of top within special tier weapons. Given to a master armament smith, it can break through to higher tier. On the spiritual energy tree above, the peak masters gazed at the green eagle sword and said, "I've heard that the Tubble clan has a treasure called the Green Eagle Blade. It's a top-grade special tier weapon that was made from the beak and feathers of a tier 4 martial animal, the green god eagle. Although the sword Drake has summoned seems similar, it does not give off the same sharpness and is likely an imitation. Even so, it has reached the special tier weapon level, a mighty power to any core formation practitioner." Master Bisma frowned slightly and said, "It's rather unfair to rely on an external item to achieve victory." Peak Master Terror chuckled and responded, "There is no rule that bans the usage of spiritual weapons in the peak selection ceremony. After all, obtaining a weapon is part of one's luck, which is also a kind of strength." Bisma giggled. "Hee, what a coward way to dodge the incoming defeat." On the spiritual energy tree, two peak masters were in a heated debate. Drake Tubble would join the Blood Slaughterer peak after the ceremony. Hence, Peak Master Terror was more than happy to see him become champion. In fact, the former may even become the guide of sorts that will draw even more disciples to the Blood Slaughterer peak, allowing it to grow stronger. Master Bisma swept an indifferent glance at the former but did not say anything. After all, using an armament was indeed within the rules. She looked towards the young werewolf's figure and secretly said in her heart, "This kid had better not lose so easily." She did not like Terror. Although it was impossible for her to do much since they were part of the same sect, disrupting his plans a little would make her feel a little better. As the countless gazes in the area converged on the golden stone platform, the prince smiled slightly as he gazed at the sword within the green light. The power that pulsed from it made his heart shiver a little in excitement. A spiritual armament at that level would be able to draw in and direct the surrounding spiritual energy, giving it enormous power. Drake's sword was evidently still somewhat lacking, maybe because it was a copy. How disappointing, muttered Ezra Zephyr. Drake already had the strength of the 4th level core formation stage and wielded powerful and abundant spiritual energy. The addition of the Green Eagle sword was akin to giving wings to a tiger, making it very difficult for him to find a worthy opponent in the 4th level core formation stage. While Ezra Zephyr was observing, Drake's icy gaze shot over as he indifferently said, "Don't blame me for bullying you. I'm from the prestigious Tubble clan and will naturally have better resources than you. This is my advantage, an advantage I would never intentionally give up, because that would only be too foolish." His tone was filled with pride. After all, there were times when being born in with a jolt, the sword transformed into a streak of green. It pierced through space at. Powerful clan was also part of one's luck and strength. Hearing that, enraged Drake made a sword seal and shouted, "Ha! Kuur!" The Green Eagle sword released a clear eagle cry as 1,000 rays of green light exploded, filling the air with deadly sword chi. Swish! With a jolt, the sword transformed into a streak of green. It pierced through space at extreme speed, shooting straight towards the prince. Ezra Zephyr's body instantly gossamer as he rapidly withdrew. "No matter how fast you are, you'll never match the speed of my sword." Drake merely sneered. "Bzz." The streak of green shuddered and bizarrely appeared in front of Ezra. A flash of sword light swept forth, heading straight for the fatal spots on Ezra's body. Before the deadly sword's spiritual energy arrived, the purplish gold scales gleamed brighter. This told Drake that these strange dragon-like scales would protect Ezra if he was stabbed by his Green Eagle sword. The might of that attack was not something the body of someone who had never practiced any external tempering techniques should clash against. Sword light rapidly enlarged his pupils. At this moment, Ezra Zephyr suddenly made a grabbing motion as the thorny hook appeared in his hand. Its small and sharp twinkled in purple and it darted forward like a snake, striking the green sword light. Clang clang clang. However, the green sword light was too powerful, scattering the snow-white hairs in a flash. Drake's body continued to back away as spiritual energy surged towards the hook called Dripa. Countless small blades proved to be obstruction after obstruction, which hindered the swings of green sword light one after another. However, the green sword light continued to press forward, destroying any obstacle in its path. The Dripa was steadily being beaten back. Regardless of all that, Ezra Zephyr's face has a strange evil smile as if everything was under his control, and from time to time his gaze changed from Drake to other lower platforms. Drake stood in the air with his arms across his chest, an annoying look in his eyes as he watched Ezra being pushed back step by step. The spiritual energy in the former's body streamed endlessly into the Green Eagle sword, allowing it to maintain its assault. The other boy may have been able to tango with a lad of the Tubble clan earlier, but that was only through the speed of the gossamer steps and the former's powerful defenses. But now, the Green Eagle sword is faster than that boy and possessed enough destructive power to penetrate his defenses. Hence, that boy is now being completely suppressed. Master Franco of Divine Demon Peak commented. Gazes that could fill the sky watched the battle on the Golden Stone platform. Numerous disciples sighed inside at this scene. As expected, Drake was still the more formidable individual. As someone who was born in the Tubble clan, his resources and foundations were far from what any ordinary disciple could match. A special tier weapon was not something an ordinary disciple would possess. At a location extremely close to the Golden Stone platform, Natli Tum and Shafapista faced each other. They had not fought because Natli did not plan on becoming Ezra's enemy. Instead, they were watching the battle between Ezra Zephyr and Drake Tubble. As they watched, Natli chuckled at Shafa and said, "See, even if you did stop me, he is still not Drake's match. His defeat will happen sooner or later." Shafapista swept an icy glance at the former, but did not reply. However, she sighed regretfully in her heart. "You dullards are unaware of our prince," she said to herself. Under the numerous watching eyes, the prince continued to be pushed back on the golden stone platform, gradually approaching its edge. However, his gaze had begun to flicker faintly as he continued to retreat. There was a peculiar look in his eyes as he looked towards the drake in his hands. While being suppressed by the green eagle sword, he could faintly sense a tiny sliver of anger begin stirring within it. As if the dignity of a king was being challenged. Rage was slowly brewing in the purple hook. Dripa's original rank power was beyond the level this realm could handle, and although it is sealed at the moment, a king was still ultimately a king. Therefore, the continuous suppression by a mere special tier weapon had now angered the fragment of a spirit that was inside Dripa. The prince's glowing gaze stared at the thorny body of the Dripa. "Hey, get along with the act," he said to his weapon. The corners of Ezra Zephyr's lips slowly raised at an angle. He had not expected the green eagle sword's suppression to bring about such an outcome. This would really spoil his plans. The dim purple hue on the Dripa's body grew brighter and brighter. It was at this moment that Drake suddenly frowned, faintly feeling that something was wrong. He could sense that the originally strange and beaten hook seemed to be gradually growing more and more concentrated, causing the power of the sword light to drop. "I cannot delay any further. I'll slash him off the stage." Drake's eyes hardened as he changed his sword's seal. The green eagle sword released an explosive sword cry in response, green light bursting forth as the sword seemed to breathe. The light rapidly expanded to 100 feet and chopped downwards, tearing open a crack in space. Numerous gasps and cries sounded across the area. Everyone clearly understood that Drake Tubble had lost his patience, and was now going to end the battle with this strike. Even amongst the 4th level core formation, there was likely no one capable of blocking this attack. Shifa's expression changed slightly, a tiny bit of worry flashing in her eyes as she tightly clenched her fists. The green sword light rapidly descended. Just as it was about to hit, the prince suddenly raised his head, seemingly endless light surging within his eyes. He grasped the purple thorny hook with both hands and shook it as the thorns on the body protruded strangely like darts. Expressionless, he powerfully swung the hook overhead as if it was a 1,000-ton hammer. "Die, you peasant scum!" Drake coldly snorted when he saw this. "Watch how my sword will chop apart that lousy hook of yours." Clank. Countless gazes gathered on the golden stone platform as the dazzling green sword light abruptly fell, smashing into the thousands of small thorns. A resonant sound of clashing metal echoed across the area. The moment the loud sound emerged, however, Drake's pupils violently shrank as horror appeared on his face. He had seen the green eagle sword shudder at the moment of impact, as it released a pained wail. The sword light was scattered as the sword was blasted away by the almost invisible purple thorny. It was as if the swing of Ezra Zephyr's hook was accompanied by endless sharp needles, power terrifying and domineering to the max. "How can this be?" Countless cries of disbelief rang out across the area. Even Master Antero and the rest of the hegemons softly gasped out in surprise. The green eagle sword was sent flying, its originally unmatched sword light now scattered. Drake hastily circulated his spiritual energy, stabilizing the green eagle sword. He looked over, only to find a glaring scratch on the sword. It was also trembling faintly, as if having sustained an injury. Drake's complexion turned ashen, disbelief filling his eyes. The green eagle sword was just moments ago thoroughly suppressing the prince. Why had the situation suddenly been reversed? The strange purple hook in Ezra's hands was clearly only a low-level special tier weapon. It didn't possess the aura of top-level special tier before. How had it scattered the sword light of his green eagle sword? On the spiritual energy tree above, Master Antero and the rest of the hegemons looked down with a sliver of shock in their gazes. All of them were focused on the purple hook Dripa in Ezra Zephyr's hands. "Hee, how interesting. The thorny hook in this little one's hands seems to be extraordinary too." Antero chuckled in surprise. The hook was only a low level earlier, but it seems to have evolved, leaping across the levels to reach the top special tier. The white-brow Master Aksama's tone was filled with interest as he continued to vocalize his findings. The hook seems to also function as an independent entity. How amazing. It seems that this kid is also blessed by luck. Master Franco nodded. Colleen Evil Peak Master Bisma's red lips curved slightly, smiling as she gazed at Ezra's figure. This little one is not bad, I'm beginning to like him more and more. As she spoke, she swept a glance at Master Terror. Terror softly chuckled, but did not respond. His gaze merely paused on the Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom for a brief moment. Under the countless gazes of shock from all around, the prince's expression was rather calm, though an apathetic semblance appeared in his eyes. He looked bored. Is that all? The prince yawned. His black robe flattered in air as he glanced at Ezra Zephyr. You see him wearing those silver braces? They contain weight imprints, alas. We do not possess a decent rune master to decipher the depth of those uncanny imprints. The words of Master Albus threw a bomb on other six. Their reaction indicated that they do not doubt the judgment of Master Albus. Master Terror's face turned grave, a wrinkle appeared on his forehead as he pondered something. The paints gripped the purple hook and swung, creating a series of afterimages. He raised his head and looked towards the ugly expression on Drake's face and said, It seems that your so-called background and resources are inferior to my own. Drake could not help but laugh in anger when he heard this, and icily said, You'd better not celebrate too early. His hands came together as vigorous spiritual energy dashed into the sky, merging with the green eagle sword that had been sent flying. The sword immediately shook as resplendent sword light exploded once more. I don't believe that I cannot chop apart your lousy hook. With a howl from Drake, green light exploded from the green eagle sword. A giant eagle seemed to emerge within the green light, releasing a long cry as an alarmingly savage aura swept forth. Go! Yelled Drake with a dark expression. The giant green eagle-like figure opened its beak, swallowing the green eagle sword, before transforming into a flash of green that dived down towards Ezra Zephyr. Ferociously imposing and destructive sword spiritual energy rippled endlessly from the green eagle's body as if intending to sunder the land. Drake had roused the remnant green god eagle soul inside the green eagle sword, and its presence caused the expressions of numerous disciples to change. The green eagle dived downwards in a threatening and ferocious manner. Ezra Zephyr's eyes widened, his lips created an involuntarily greedy smirk as he said, The soul of green god eagle. Thank you, Honorable Drake. The prince raised his both hands, heading towards the incoming attack. Violent black lightnings flickered and caused chaos on the golden platform. Dust and pebbles rose, segregating the sense of sight. Ezra Zephyr took in a deep breath, before the poisonous hook was ferociously swung. The wolf howled, merging with the attack as they boldly advanced. In the end, they crashed into the giant green eagle under countless shocked gazes. Boom! At the moment of impact, an extremely berserk spiritual energy shockwave violently swept outwards. Every gaze was tightly glued to the epicenter of the clash, where they saw the green eagle release a piercing shriek as an endless torrent of sword spiritual energy rained down on the hook. However, none of this mattered to the latter as it continued to charge forward with terrifying power, smashing directly into the giant green eagle. Clang! A loud clang rang out. A wail immediately burst from the giant green eagle, its enormous body blown to bits by the charge of Dripa. As the green god eagle's soul fragment, it vanished into thin air. The green eagle sword was flung backwards, crack after crack appearing on its blade. Drake paled and vomited a mouthful of blood, evidently also affected. Gasp after gasp sounded in succession. No one had expected that Drake would be the first to be injured in the clash between these two. However, a certain large group burst into celebration. Their cheers echoed in the sky. They were the disciples of Naren Continent, who doesn't have slightest doubt in their prince. Mahi, who looked from far, breathed a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Shifa coldly smiled as she looked at Natli and said, It seems that who becomes the champion is clear. Natli frowned as she replied, Your leader is indeed very mighty. She paused for a moment, before she looked at Shifa and asked, May I know your name? Shifa Pista, she answered. Natli nodded his head in acknowledgement and said, Shifa, Ezra has angered Drake now. And the Drake Tubble I know should know will not lose so easily. Arr. The moment the final word left her mouth, a furious roar suddenly thundered from the golden stone platform. A surge of alarming spiritual energy undulations swept out from Drake's body. His originally handsome face had turned extremely dark and stormy, intense rage boiling between his brows. Ezra Zephyr's counter-attack had thoroughly humiliated him. With an eerily chilling shout, he suddenly bit the top of his tongue and spat out blood on the green eagle sword. Bloody light blossomed from the sword as it ferociously shot forth, unleashing a rain of attacks on the Dripa to keep it occupied. At the same time, a scarlet glow surfaced in Drake's eyes as his body moved, appearing in the sky above Ezra Zephyr. His hands rapidly formed a series of seals as dark green spiritual energy began to flood the area behind him. Cyclone Ordnance, Triple Sword. Them hissed and roared, faintly resembling a dragon roar as a cruel and savage aura spread across the area. Vigorous spiritual energy frantically gathered, turning into 300 feet long green swords above him. The swords began to fall with frightening velocity, heading straight towards Ezra. It's the Cyclone Ordnance. That's a high-grade gamma layer technique and is one of the strongest in the Outer Mountains. So that's the technique Drake selected in the Mystic Demon Library. Numerous cries of shock were heard. Many disciples could not help but sigh as they shook their heads. Who could have imagined that the battle between these two individuals would reach such levels? Even some of the normal official Outer Mountain disciples would be unable to achieve this, right? They asked themselves. Under the attention of innumerable gazes, the prince gazed at the three green swords falling from the sky as he felt the astonishing undulations contained within them. Ezra took in a deep breath as the Dripa in his hand disappeared and he raised his hands. The spiritual energy in his body erupted with a rumble. 3 pillars of spiritual energy, each 100 feet tall, dashed into the sky from the top of his head. Savage violence pulsed from the 3 pillars, and at closer inspection, one would discover the glowing silhouettes of 3 ferocious martial animals within the pillars. The moment the 3 spiritual energy pillars emerged, the 3 martial animal inside them hissed and roared, faintly resembling a dragon roar as a cruel and savage aura spread across the area. The eyes of countless disciples widened, evidently recognizing the technique. The technique the prince had used was also one of the high-grade gamma layer techniques of the Outer Mountains Mystic Demon Library, the 8 Lost Dragons. Under the many shocked gazes, 3 boundless martial animal like torrents of spiritual energy shuddered as they smashed into the 3 green swords falling from the sky. For an instant, the world around them seemed to shake. 300 feet tall pillars of chaos force dashed into the sky as a savage and cruel aura unfurled. One would faintly see the pillars take on the shape of a legendary race, dragons. The 3 martial animals were the 3 dragon-type blood Ezra had refined. They had now fused with the prince's spiritual energy, greatly amplifying its power and giving it ferocious and domineering characteristics when used. Drake's eyes widened slightly when he saw the 3 spiritual energy dragons that were charging into the sky. Soon after, he let out an icy chuckle. Only 100 feet? It seems that being denied the blood of top-grade Tier 3 martial animal blood has affected you substantially. He was naturally aware that the prince was practicing the 8 lost dragons. However, the power of this technique was dependent on the quality of the martial animal blood. Back then, Drake had bought out the bottles of top-grade Tier 3 martial animals' blood in advance, making Ezra leave no choice but to choose the lower-grade blood. As such, the power of Ezra's 8 lost dragons was naturally unable to reach its peak, or it seemed that way. Let me destroy your 8 lost dragons with my cyclone ordnance. An ominous light flitted across Drake's eyes. Both of them were using high-grade gamma layer spiritual techniques, and he had smoothly mastered his. Drake's seals changed as the 3 green comets began to tremble violently, their dreadful power shaking even the sky itself, making the expressions of numerous disciples turn grave. Under the attention of countless gazes, the 3 dragons released a torrential flood of ferocity, baring their fangs and claws as they tore through the air. Each one of the 3 dragons was stronger than Ezra's glittering wind and light technique. With all three lined up, even a fourth-level core formation expert would have no option but to retreat. The prince had likewise sensed that Drake had no thoughts of backing down, and he sighed in response. It seems that the other party was very confident. It only took a moment for the prince to understand the origin of his opponent's confidence, causing an icy smile to rise from the corners of his mouth. There was nothing to say at this point. Their battle had already reached its peak, and there was no longer any point in holding back. The prince raised his hand, and the three dragons smashed into the three falling green swords. The world around them seems to shudder violently at this moment. Destroy them. An icy glow was revealed in Drake's eyes. Terrifying power pulsed from the three green swords, a force so great that it could level every mountain in a 1,000-mile radius. The green swords admittedly contained dreadful destructive power. At the instant of impact, the three spiritual energy dragons were immediately forced back, causing them to fall along with the momentum of the swords as they howled angrily. It was clear that Drake's cyclone ordnance looked stronger. When he saw this, the corners of his mouth slowly began to rise. Ezra, have you finally reached your limits? If so, the first place will be mine. Drake's hand suddenly pressed downwards, causing berserk spiritual chi to spew out from the green swords again, as if intending to smash the three dragons to smithereens. The three dragons continued to roar, but were still slowly pushed down little by little. While regretful sighs filled the sky, the prince's expression remained calm from start to end. He gazed at the slowly descending green swords, sensing that their power had already reached the limit. I think you should take a look at. Is that all? Then it's my turn, muttered the prince to himself. A split later, he suddenly produced a long, drawn-out whistle. The whistle was akin to a clap of thunder. At this very moment, the three suppressed dragons released thunderous roars in response. As they roared, the savage auras pulsing from their bodies began to steadily rise all of a sudden. Each dragon was different. The first was like a serpent, long and spiteful. The second dragon had wings with a body of a scaleless lizard. Last looked more like the dragon in Tales. Scaly, thorny, and rancorous. The original 100-feet-tall pillars abruptly began to grow, reaching a height of 300 feet. What? This sudden turn of events made Drake's pupils shrink. How can this be? He clearly only refined low-grade Tier 3 martial animal's blood. How can it possibly be so powerful? He had studied the 8 lost dragons before. It was said that only by refining high-grade Tier 3 blood would the pillars reach a height of 300 feet. He clearly remembered that there was no other top-level blood in the Glittering Jewels Pavilion. Seeing the twisted face of Drake, the werewolf grinned. ROAR. Astonishing power exploded from the 300-feet-tall dragons. They waved their long tails, wrapping them around the three green swords as a ferocious aura erupted. Dong bum tam. The three green swords were instantly shattered, causing three different sounds, before turning into specks of light that filled the sky. An uproar filled the sky. No one had expected yet another twist. The advantage Drake originally had was now completely gone. After shattering the three green swords, the three dragons shrank substantially, though they still contained alarming power. In a flash, they appeared above Drake. The three dragons roared as they pounced, their frightening power engulfing Drake. Horror surfaced on Drake's face as he hurriedly circulated his spiritual energy to create a 100-foot-tall green wall of chi in front of him. He indeed was an excellent cultivator. Alas! His opponent was just more extraordinary than him. Boom! Berserk shockwaves swept outwards from the collision. Everyone watched as Drake's green chi wall was blasted apart. His body was caught in the aftershocks, falling from the sky like a cannonball. With a loud boom, he smashed into the golden stone platform. Cracks emerged on the stone platform while dust filled the air. In the sky above, the three beasts had used up all of their energy and began to gradually fade away. The prince spat out a breath of air, his face expressionless as he gazed at the spot Drake had fallen. The world around them fell silent for an instant. The fights that were still ongoing elsewhere also paused for a moment as shocked gaze after gaze looked towards the top stone platform. Compared to the battle there, the rest of them really looked like little kids. When they saw Drake being struck down from the air, all of them could not help but swallow again and again, terror now filling their gazes when they looked towards the prince. No one had expected Ezra's battle power to be so overwhelming. It was at that time when Ezra Zephyr stopped. He detached his spiritual energy and stepped towards a side to get a better view of the remaining platforms. His sole figure at the edge was engulfed by multitudinous gazes. Everyone wondered about what this man was thinking. "You bastard!" Drake slurred as he hit his palm on the ground and stood by the pushing force. The Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom gave him a tentative look through his shoulders. All of a sudden, Ezra's smirking face turned grave. "Chain of Chaos," said Ezra. The second circle spell came into play as 4 formation circles were formed. Drake's eyes widened when he looked at them. He knew what they were capable of. His very own colleague Paul Channa was caught by this spell and couldn't free himself until he was slammed on the 8th floor. 4 chains came out of the circles. Their target was none other than the people's proclaimed strongest outer disciple of Spirit Devouring Mountain. The chains were forged by nothing but spiritual energy. They tooled their way with thundering crackles. Drake understood and jumped into the sky. He probed the limited area he has to avoid the chains. But to his demise, the golden platform was finite. Seeing no other chance to escape, he gritted his teeth and cried hotly, "These miserable chains won't work against me." The prince gazed at Drake with an unknown irritation varnishing his face. "Then stop running like a boorish pig and destroy them," Ezra said indifferently. "I'll grant your wish." Drake smirked. He expanded his fingers and Green Eagle sword flitted into his hand. He waved the sword ferociously and 4 gashes of green spiritual energy were released, each with the aim of destroying the chain. Both spiritual attacks quickly collided and 4 explosions resounded. Boom 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 boom. At the collision, a strange vapor covered the area, murking the outcome of the collision. Nobody yet batted an eye and something came out, tearing the murkiness. To be accurate, that something was 4 separate things, 4 chains. The attack of Drake couldn't destroy the spell of Ezra. Drake panicked as he raised his sword again. Cyclone Ordnance, double sword. A terrifying amount of spiritual energy madly gathered around and in no time 2 giant swords came into existence above Drake. It was the same gamma layer technique that he used before. However, this time he called out 2 swords. Drake moved and the swords descended onto the 4 chains, and within a blink, the swords cleanly divided the 4 chains and destroyed them. "Haha, you saw that?" Drake laughed. Drake's eyebrows twitched when he witnessed Ezra's disappointing face. Drake was still affected by the technique he used. He has yet to firm his feet when noticed something glittering in black and red behind him. He wheeled his head to see the better of it and found 4 new formation circles. Huh. He was astounded. He just destroyed the spell a second ago. How can one cast another spell so fast? He asked himself. "I think you should take a look at." Crackle crackle. The chains came and his instincts kicked in, but before he could do anything, 1 chain maliciously caught his ankle. Ezra moved his hand a little and the chain dragged Drake with unopposing power. Drake's one hand wielded the Green Eagle sword. He stabbed it numerous times, but the result always came in failure. He used his spiritual energy to defuse the chain, but that didn't work as well. Bomb. The body of Drake was slammed into the ground. "Arg, you rascal." He spat blood and insults. "Bham, bomb, bham." The other disciples had fingers in their mouths as they were watching the infamous Drake Tubble of the proud Tubble clan being bashed. Ezra smashed Drake on the golden platform like a Herman beats dirty cloth on a stone. Blood dripped from Drake as he half-consciously looked at Ezra Zephyr. The prince moved his hand slightly and the remaining 3 chains came into play. Each chain held 1 limb of Drake. The circles were made in midair. These chains contained chaos spiritual energy. If Ezra had wanted, he could have ground Drake by using these chains, but he had other plans. Drake Tubble was hanged by his wrists and ankles, his white dress changed into red and brown as blood and dirt assaulted its cleanness. Even the hegemons on the spiritual energy tree were baffled as they looked at the scene without blinking for once. Ezra looked at the 10,000 platforms from the very top and opened his mouth. This sect is full of weak shit. Quietness befell upon the outer mountains. No one was willing to admit that Ezra Zephyr would say something like that. Not even Naren disciples. Well, that's one bizarre obiter dictum, said the man on first branch as he gently stroked his well-maintained shiny white hair. He was none other than Master Antero of arcane wizardly peak. Master Terror smiled angrily. He ought to be killed. And why should he be? Asked Master Aksama. He disrespected the sect. Master Terror replied. Master Aksama laughed gently. Have you forgotten what Master Franco had done at his peak ceremony? Terror sighed. The rumors were so true that I who came later heard it. He spat on an elder and peed on the golden platform. And what punishment did he receive? Aksama asked. Nothing, because the old peak master of Divine Demon Peak saved him. Answered Terror with an unsatisfied tone. Correct. This is Spirit Devouring Mountain. Only strength matters here. If you show your strength and get a backer, you might live after committing blasphemy. Master Franco on the other side scratched his head in embarrassment. On the golden platform, Ezra Zephyr looked at the bloody Drake Tubble, growling like a mad dog, struggling to let loose. Every single time Drake poured his spiritual energy to break, the chains made of chaos force twisted his limbs. The sheer pain protested against using any more of such giddy attempts, and that all end up with Drake miserably closing his eyes. Ezra peered at the masses, his face showed the colors of disappointment. This sect is full of weak shit. His voice echoed through the outer mountains, piquing the 7 figures on the spiritual energy tree. However, not even their gelid gazes could flinch the prince as he continued. You all from Shurian and Ryan continents, is this the guy you worshipped as your savior? He gestured at Drake Tubble, who was helplessly hanging in midair. After giving him every bit of the chance to use everything he got in his arsenal, I got bored and chose to pin him midair. He stopped for a while and smirked before continuing. You lots are not geniuses, but failures of Shurian who couldn't get admission in your home continent sections. Thus, leaving you no choice except to join a big sect in this remote continent. His words were like poisoned arrows, piercing the hearts of prided geniuses of Shurian and Ryan. On the second platform, Ravina in Gale gritted her teeth as he howled. What are you babbling about? That's bullshit, we hot dash. Silence. Ordered Ezra, his voice resembled the sound of rumbling thunder. Ravina's heart skipped a beat. For the first time in her life, she felt a terrifying power and murderous intent directed towards her. She didn't know how Ezra got such an aura, but she knew that if she speaks again, she might die. The dominant and ill-tempered Ravina couldn't speak a word. She was dying to retort, but her instincts stopped her. On the spiritual energy tree, the old man's eyes widened. Ho! He made the little red quiet. He was none other than Master Aksama in Gale, family ancestor of Ravina in Gale. He insulted your clan's direct descendant and your continent's disciples. Will you let it slide just like that? Master Franco said as he massaged his bulging muscles. Master Aksama smiled. Well, whatever he said is true. Weren't we all failures in our continent? Master Aksama, don't yoke us with yourself, you are the only peak master belonging to the Ryan continent. Is that so? He mumbled and pivoted his head towards the bulky Master Franco. Your home continent's name is Durtati, right? Master Franco fleetly nodded. As far as my puny brain works, the Durtati continent is at least 7 times stronger and 4 times more enriched than this Naren continent. If that's true, then what is Master Franco doing here in this remote continent with scarce resources? Aksama smiled again after completing his side in one breath. Arrows of reality hit the hearts of peak masters with silence as their only shield. They all gazed at Aksama, but no one could deny that he spat facts. Ezra remained unflinched as passing winds gave him tribute. his long coat flattering like the flag of a revolutionary army. Ezra opened his mouth again. Joining this decaying nugatory sect and playing young master means shit to outsiders. I think you should take a look at. The bewildered disciples glanced at him, they blinked 3 times to digest what they heard. How could a mere core establishment stage practitioner say something so outrageous about the sect in front of peak masters? Spirit Devouring Mountain. Haha, a shitty sect that got its position stolen by a newly made sect. What's funnier is that some degenerates traveled continents to get here, ha ha ha. The prince guffawed, his cackle reached every listening ear. On the spiritual tree, the handsome swordsman raised his finger and pointed at Ezra Zephyr, his face exuded malice. Terror, lower that finger. A mysterious voice echoed in his mind, Master Terror jerked, sweat drenched his clothes as he bowed. Supreme Leader, this servant seeks forgiveness. The other peak masters were also enraged at Ezra, but seeing the reaction of Terror, they bowed in milliseconds. Not only them, but all the elders behind also followed suit. Their bows were directed towards the gigantic, demonic mountain. Arise. The thundering voice said. All of them nodded and raised their postures. After a brief silence, the voice came again. Don't interrupt the boy, let him speak. As you command, Supreme Leader. All masters said in unison and changed their gaze towards Ezra, this time their gazes held no malice. Ezra's words devastated every proud disciple who came from other continents. However, there were some smart ones. If that's the case, then it makes you look more pathetic. Ezra followed at the source of the voice which took his sight to the third platform. The one who spoke was Paul Channa. Paul Channa not only was a genius in martial prowess, but he also possessed a bright brain. He knew Ezra psychologically defeated Shurien's disciples by surmounting Drake Tubble with ease. Now his poisonous words worked as the last nail in the coffin. That's why Paul spoke up, he continued. For the past 15 years, Shurien disciples shined in new batches. We didn't even know Naren disciples are a thing. In one way, you just confirmed that we of Shurien are so advanced that even our failures are better than your geniuses. Hearing that, the breathless Shurien disciples gave a painful sigh before causing an uproar. Yeah, you are weak, Naren is weak. There is no Spirit Devouring Mountain without Shurien disciples. This sect is property of the Shurien continent, not this trashy Naren continent. So what if you defeated Drake? Our seniors are here as well. Hearing all the comments of enraged Shurien disciples, the werewolf prince smirked, as if he was waiting for this to happen. Hearing that, Ezra quickly wheeled his head to see the elders. Have you heard them, masters? I thought Spirit Devouring Mountain was an independent sect, but they claim it's Shurien's property, and without them, Spirit Devouring Mountain will be nothing. The masters looked at each other in puzzlement, they grasped the intention of this youth. No one knew the meaning behind the exchange of their silent gazes. This little shit is cunning. Master Aksama said. The other masters surprisingly looked at him. He must be pissed off, they thought. The one to speak first was the master of Arcane Wizardry Peak, Antero. Spirit Devouring Sect is property of Supreme Leader and no one else. Capture the one who claimed that and hang him. He sent the order, a few shadows flickered and landed on the platform on which that Shurien disciple was fighting. Within the blink of an eye, that unfortunate man disappeared. Quietness again slammed on the outer mountains, and the little pyre that sparkled in Shurien disciples' hearts got extinguished by Ezra Zephyr. Ezra laughed evilly and looked at Paul Channa, with his signature grin painted on his face. We do have geniuses who could defeat your failures easily, but alas. They are all in 7 first-degree sects, or I should say the 7 sacred sects. Ever heard of them? Our sect used to be one of them, but lost its rank ever since you termites arrived. Paul Channa stayed silent for a while before replying. Our sect will surpass them one day, we of Shurien will make it possible. The prince cackled loudly. Haha, you of Shurien? Ever since wealthy Shurien disciples came, this sect that had its foundation carved through the might is right mindset got polluted. The elders sell the quota of students to wealthy disciples, bereaving the future of countless deserving disciples. What? Master Bisma cried in surprise, but her voice was muted by other masters, preventing it to reach the ears of the disciples. Master Antero's eyes widened. This cannot be true. It's true, we were so busy in training and teaching selected disciples that we neglected outer mountains and granted too much authority to greedy elders. Master Albus of Zenith Ghost Peak said. Meanwhile, Ezra popped his knuckles and spoke. I have a question for all of you dickheads. His voice was imbued with spiritual energy, making it loud and clear. Who do you think will win, if our second-degree Spirit Devouring Mountain will go on an all-out war with any of the 7 first-degree sects? All the peak masters and elders were shocked. This question is not coincidental. They said to each other. Ezra stroked his hair and waited for an answer. Seeing the sheer silence, he spoke again. You dullards are pissing me off, let me ask an easy question. He looked at Paul. You smart-ass, who do you think would win if Spirit Devouring Mountain wages war against the closest first-degree sect, Duel Mountain Peak? This time even the calm Master Antero lost his composure. Xavier, he uttered. A well-dressed slim gentleman took a step forward. I'm here, Peak Master. Xavier replied. How did he know about that? Xavier formed a tense face as he explained everything that happened during the Spirity Bailiwick. After hearing everything, the surprise only increased. This youth's father and grandfather fought against elders of 7 sacred sects? Antero asked astonishingly. They fought envoys of 7 sects? Outlandish and doubtful. Master Bisma commented. Master Terror showed a pondering expression as he said. The envoy of sword mastery abode was Blade? He is a genius swordsman and cultivator. I know about Morther, he was the strongest envoy there. I once met him in Summit and offered him to be my direct disciple, but he refused. He was beaten by an old man. You sure about that? Asked the bulging Master Franco. I think you should take a look at. I am 100% sure. Xavier confirmed. Every peak master and elder looked at Ezra, and within a few moments, his image rose to new heights. The smartest Master Aksama looked at the demonic mountain and questioned himself. Is that why Supreme Leader favored the boy earlier? Ezra's question baffled the handsome Paul Channa. He became quiet for quite a while, inspecting the smirking face of Ezra. Isn't that obvious? Said Paul. Be clear, the only riddles I like are the ones I give. Ezra retorted. Paul frowned and replied. If we fight now, Duel Mountain Peak will win. We at least need 10 more years with focused plannings to surpass them. Clap, clap, clap. Well, you don't have that much time, said the prince as he clapped. Paul squinted his eyes and asked. What do you mean? The dead silence turned into a chaotic uproar. What the hell is he talking about? Hey, now that he said that. I also heard about a war in my continent. No way, if that happens. Duel Mountain Peak sect will eat us alive. Wait for Peak Master's answers. Why are Peak Masters silent? These whispers and yells reached the powerful Peak Masters. Master Antero, who was in the lead, took a deep breath. It is true, we are going to have a war with the Duel Mountain Peak sect in 1 year. But rest assured, we will win the war. The words of Antero hit them like a falling meteor, their mind became blank. Amidst the confusion, a female jumped off the silver platform. She was Natalie Toom. I am sorry, I have a bright future and can't join a defeated war. I'm out. Shifa Pista, who was with her on the same platform, smiled mockingly and said loudly. Disgusting. Natalie heard her but didn't pay her any heed and moved away. It was the start. After her, thousands of people retreated. Leaving the platforms vacant, Master Antero clenched his fists in anger. He blamed Ezra in his heart but couldn't do anything. Unlike the prior teeming platforms, the current spectacle looked disheartening. The fight paused on every platform. The number of disciples leaving reached more than 2/3 of the total. Paul Channa clenched his hands, his brain was in disbelief. He was struggling to decide whether to stay or run. all he has to do is to step out of the platform. With no possession of the platform, he will eventually be disqualified. On the 10th platform, Toria seemed drenched in sweat. In front of him stood Rock with a similar physical condition. Both fought hard, aiming to take each other's life. The sudden news of war affected their match as well. Toria gave an unsettled gaze to Rock before jumping off the platform. "Stop, Toria. Fight me," yelled Rock. Toria looked at him with a side eye. He expressed a strange sad face as he said, "Next time, if you can survive the war, I'll wait for you." Rock gritted his teeth in anger, but still stayed silent. On the 9th platform, Ash Beckham relaxed his body. The youngster in front of him was in high fighting spirit. His determined gaze showed that he does not care about war and will do whatever he can to get this platform. Ash took a big sigh. He looked above at Ezra and smiled for an unknown reason. The prince caught him doing that and slightly nodded his head as if he understood the intention. Ash shifted his gaze and saw the enormous entities sitting on tree branches made of nothing but spiritual energy. A regretful look appeared on his face. He always aimed to be like them, to be one of the gigantic powerhouses of the lower realm. After having a heartful look at them, he closed his eyes and looked above in the sky and let the gale kiss his tensed head. "I don't want to do it, I want to stay. But I have no other choice," he mumbled before taking a step towards the platform boundaries. "Hey, Ash! What the hell are you doing?" Rock demanded an answer. "Sorry, Rock, I have some burden on my shoulders and some responsibilities that I can't turn my back on. I can't die yet." Tears fell from his eyes when he said that. Even the thick-head Rock felt that he had a real reason. Several platforms became empty after both fighters left the platform. Amongst them was the 8th silver platform on which Ray Lime and Usopp faced each other. The news of war made them vacate the platforms, because even an insane would demarcate the power level of two sects. Seeing the empty platform, their Galarm's opponent jumped. Her eyes caught the Soul Mahi in Gale on the 7th platform as she landed on the 8th platform like a shadow. She was given the rank of 9th strongest unofficial outer student. Her name was Ava. She gave a look at their Galarms from far. "All I wanted is one of the top 10 seats, the number is meaningless." The chaos slowly settled. The initial number of disciples was around 45,000, out of which a mere amount of 15,000 remained. Many geniuses left the platforms to save their lives. However, there were 10,000 platforms and 15,000 disciples. After a series of dreadful news, the remaining students restarted the conquest of platforms. "Why don't you step out as well?" asked Argus with a motivating smile. "Why should I, when I can undoubtedly thrash you?" replied the mountain-like man named Ethan. He said and raised his boulder hands and swung it towards Argus Waska. Bomb! The giant werewolf looked like a dwarf in front of Ethan. With the impact that was thrown away, and he glided and stopped a foot away from the boundary. "You have a special tier armament?" asked Argus in an astonishing manner. "Yes." He showed his hands, hidden in metal-like gloves. "These are torpedo gloves, they double the impact of brute power." Satisfaction shined on his giant face. "Haha. An impressive newbie he is. Just look at his beautiful size," the muscle man Master Franco commented with a merry simper. "All right then," cried Argus Waska, and with a shining sparkle of light, his entire arms were engulfed by a silver hue. A second later, the hue vanished and everyone saw a full silver gauntlet on Argus Waska's arm. "That energy! He also has a special tier armament?" the masses gasped. "Cease the useless efforts, the only two who can fight me physically ended up meeting each other on the 10th platform." The giant Ethan raised his hand and swung it again. Argus Waska ducked to avoid it and looked at the 10th platform. "Oh, those guys? The other one who left was dominated by Arthur, right?" Ethan squinted his eyes. All of a sudden, dark blue spiritual energy started to revolve around him. His special tier gloves gleamed along the resonating spiritual energy. It gathered on his fist as he uttered, "Gamma layer skill, whacking wham." A giant fist formed of spiritual energy floated towards Argus. It came slowly but was so wide and powerful that dodging was out of option. It was a low-grade gamma layer spiritual technique. The martial master of Bloodfang Kingdom sighed. You are underestimating me, is it because I never had limelight? He touched his aching heart and mumbled. I want to become famous as well. The gamma layer spiritual technique was about to hit him when he clenched his fists. Let me show you what power actually is. Spiritual energy gathered around his gauntlets and condensed around them, making a thick, vibrating visible layer. Gamma layer skill, Gong of Borden. Master Franco's eyes widened. He learned Gong of Borden? The spiritual energy vibrated ferociously. The giant fist reached and was 1 meter away when Argus stomped his foot and pressured his waist to make a solid momentum. He threw a straight punch against the incoming giant fist. 3 gongs, I think you should take a look at. BBZZZZZZ. A strange buzzing sound echoed throughout the platform. The whacking wham was overpowering Gong of Borden. At the same time, the masses heard something. Gong. The spiritual technique of Ethan was pushed back. Gong. Argus Waska's spiritual technique overpowered Ethan's. Gong boom. Third gong resounded and the giant fist burst in midair, leaving the majority with their jaws dropped. Master Franco, who was excited, calmed down. Disappointment danced on his face. Master Franco, aren't you happy? Someone has chosen your hard work, said Master Bisma. Franco remained silent. Instead of him, Albus replied. If Franco was to be in his place, he would have rung 8 gongs. The lad has a good physique, but he only managed to ring 3 gongs, that's why he is disappointed. Bisma laughed. Well, he is the first one to ever ring a gong. Haha, that's true. My techniques are not for everyone. Franco cackled. Ethan sneered. You have some power, worthy to follow Ezra Zephyr. The laughing face of Argus Waska changed. Are you judging His Majesty by fighting me? Indeed I am, a subordinate represents his master, Ethan answered. The atmosphere suddenly changed, and killing intent rose from Argus Waska. He dashed towards the giant Ethan. The sturdy mountain-like youth concreted his stance, ready to even take a falling meteor. Argus threw a left jab. Ethan flinched and raised his hands to block the lightning-fast jab. WHOSSH. All he blocked was air. It was a feint. He lowered his gaze only to find that a straight punch was about to hit his chest. He gritted his teeth and toughened himself with spiritual energy. Gong of Borden, 6 gongs. Bomb. The punch hit directly and cleanly to Ethan's body. The impact shook him up. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Gong gong. 2 powerful blows hit his chest and he vomited out blood. Gong gong. He was blown away. The light armor he wore was damaged. Gong gong. His ribs got broken, his armor was shattered and his mouth was filled with his own blood. Ha ha ha, very impressive. 6 is passable, he is not on my level, but he is above the rest. Master Franco jumped in excitement. Argus Waska raised his hands and jumped. I won, hell yeah. The jolly bulky werewolf was amidst the celebration when the humongous one stood again. Huh, you can move? Argus asked with a puzzled expression. Ethan breathed heavily and muttered. Come out, Tundalulika. SWWIISSSH. A giant wave of spiritual energy emerged as the martial spirit of Ethan came out, a giant dark blue golem. His body seemed to be made of an uncertain type of metal. Ethan clenched his fist and it started to gleam in dark blue. Whacking wham, he called out his attack. The same gamma layer skill that he used earlier, but this time he had his martial spirit out. The same fist formed with shattering and forceful spiritual energy. The size of the punch was 5 times larger. The whacking wham spiritual technique moved towards Argus with destructive intentions. Argus looked at the incoming attack and blew out his breath. Whew. Alright, no more mercy. On the third platform, Paul Chana looked bewildered. His thoughts wandered in his mind. fighting a cruel battle to decide what to do. The decision was very tough yet crucial. "You should follow the majority," said Zulfi Dmitri, who was calmly waiting for Paul to make a choice. His hand was placed on his long sword's hilt that decorated his waist. Paul gave a decisive gaze to Zulfi. He felt disrespected. "Why didn't you follow the majority?" Paul answered with a question. Paul shot a fake giggle. He paused for a moment. His eyes saw the silver platform. He breathed a soothing sigh and extended his hand. A ring glittered on his finger. It was a spatial ring. Whoosh! A golden-colored glaive came out. It shone brightly like the sun. It had an outstanding light aura, showing that the weapon was of special tier. "I'll stay, let fate decide my decision," Paul proudly said. Zulfi Dmitri clenched his sword and it vanished. At the exact moment a new sword and a new set of armor appeared. The sword was off-white, the armor harmonized with the sword and changed its color to off-white. A special tier weapon and full armor. Paul was astounded. He was a rich guy, yet he didn't have a full special tier armor. Zulfi Dmitri didn't change his grave expression. "You misjudged our prince." Paul gander at the sword and asked, "What's its name?" "Paladin's Pledge," Zulfi replied. Paul smiled. "Mine is called Reverie Light, it's one of our family's treasures." "Haha, I stole it before coming here." Zulfi's expression finally changed as he asked in curiosity, "Why would a young lord of a prominent family steal the family treasure?" "You could have asked your father." A doleful smile was released by Paul. "Why would a son of concubine be given such a thing? My siblings are more genius than me. I heard they have scattered my wanted posters all over the city, but I was smart enough to run away safely." He winked at Zulfi. "Is that why you are staying here?" asked Zulfi. "Why else would I stay? I even managed to fool Drake Tubble that I am a direct descendant of the main family by showing him this Reverie Light. Everything was going smoothly until your prince came. He defeated Drake, ruined my plans, and even shared a piece of depressing news." Paul sighed. "Have you ever thought of your mother? She must be suffering for you." "Haha, let her, she never hugged me and called me a failure. Why would I cling my mind to some woman who never showed any motherly love? The only thing that helped me throughout my life is my brain and martial prowess." "Well, what about you? Does your mother love you?" "It must be a warm feeling." Zulfi Dmitri smiled bitterly. "I am an orphan, with no clue what my parents looked like. My uncle raised me, and our kingdom's royal family gave me a purpose. My uncle died 2 years ago. Now my life belongs solely to the royal family of Bloodfang Kingdom." Paul widened his eyes in shock. "Wow. We are kind of the same," he said and tightened his grip on glaive. "Let's continue this chatter with our actions." Zulfi Dmitri held his sword high as he replied, "Much better." Ravina in Gale swung his blazing whip to tear up her opponent. But before the whip could hit, a wall of ice appeared and blocked it. "Boomy, think you should take a look at." The hot whip against the icy wall caused a blasting sound to resound in the outer mountains. XYR blocked and dodged every basic attack of Ravina coldly. "Stop running and fight properly," Ravina cried in frustration. XYR's black clothes flattered as he jumped. The dragon images on his dress gave him a fancy look. His hat was waving behind his back, attached to his collar through a stretchable string. His hair that he always hid with straw hat was finally revealed. The right side of his hair had white color while the left side was yellow. Ravina jerked his hand and the whip changed its direction in midair and tore its way towards XYR. Sixth circle spells. Lava Mamba, Frost Cobra. Spiritual energy emerged from his body as 2 different mana outpoured out of XYR. From the right side, a cobra made of ice came and dashed towards Ravina in Gale, and from his left came out another snake made of nothing but lava. It has the same aim. Boom. The lava mamba hit the blazing whip and caused an explosion. The collision of 2 hot attacks caused strange smoke. However, in the next moment, the frost cobra pierced the smoke and went straight towards the unbalanced Ravina in gale. Gamma layer skill, heat wave. A hot gale of spiritual energy was unleashed and the icy snake was melted before it could hit Ravina in gale. The lady in red was eminently stupid. What was that? She mumbled. XYR stood in front of him with his expressionless look. Lady, my master has told me to go easy on you. Please, surrender. I am a lot stronger than you. Shut up. Ravina retorted before questioning. How did you use another type of spiritual energy? XYR didn't answer and stayed silent. On the spiritual tree, even the peak masters were in stupefaction. Master Antero, did I see that lad using 2 different types of mana? Asked Master Franco. The master of arcane wizardry peak didn't respond as he unblinkingly stared at XYR. Xavier. He called the name. Yes, peak master. Xavier answered the call. Tell me everything about him. He said. Xavier nodded and explained everything. Every master was bewildered. That child is the product of magical experiments. Master Antero uttered. They call us demonic sect, but it seems the real demons reside on the other side of the continent. Master Aksama commented. A strangely satisfied grin appeared on Master Antero's face as he said. I want him, you all can take whoever you want, but this child will become a part of my peak. You cannot imagine what disastrous power he contains. He has finally lost it, Master Bisma chuckled. Master Albus looked at Antero. Antero, if he has 2 different martial spirits, then it will be a problem of what to teach him. He needs 2 spiritual techniques of equal output and input to keep his contrasting mana in balance. The very explanation of yin and yang, I say. Said Aksama. A tense line appeared on Master Antero's forehead as he pondered something. A few seconds later his eyes widened. Hope and despair. He murmured. What do you mean by that? Asked Master Bisma. Hey! Are you insane? The tone of Master Albus changed. Even the calm Master Aksama wheeled his head to see Antero. You are aware that it's a forbidden technique. It seemed that only these 3 oldest masters were familiar with this name. Master Antero nodded his head. I am not a fool, I will seek an audience with Supreme Leader later and ask him. The masters turned silent and changed their sight towards the platforms. The gigantic fist of dark blue color made its way to Argus Waska. He clenched his right fist in response, the spiritual energy swarmed out of his body and circled his right gauntlet. The more spiritual energy gathered, the more vibration his gauntlet made. Gong of Borden, 12 gongs. He took a step and glided his foot palm to exert maximum force as he neatly directed his punch to the gamma layer skill of Ethan. BAANNNG. The punch and fist collided and caused a deafening metallic noise. Argus was pushed back until the people heard the sound of the bell. Gong. The power of the fist diminished. Gong gong. The gamma layer spiritual technique whacking wham was halted. Gong gong gong. At the 6th gong, the fist was pushed back. Gong gong. Cracks appeared on the fist, and a strange spiritual energy bell could be vividly seen above the platform. Every time it rang, the power of Argus' skill doubled. On the 5th branch, Master Franco clenched his fists in anticipation. 8 gongs. That's more than enough reason for me to fight other peak masters for him. He said to himself. Gong. The skill of Ethan vibrated and was destroyed. Boom. Ethan coughed out blood and Master Franco, who was cheerfully sitting, jumped and stood up. Gong gong. 2 more gongs rang above the platform. Ethan, who was pondering about what to do, felt a warm sensation on his chest. I think you should take a look at. BHAM. 2 power blows hit his chest. Second was more powerful than first. What? He was stupefied. Master Albus quickly looked at Master Franco, who had his eyes widened and jaw dropped. Someone more talented than you in external body technique has come. Gong gong. He looked above and could still see the vivid bell. The giant master of Divine Demon Peak couldn't resist and jump. He leapt over the other top platforms and plunged onto the fifth platform. Bam! The entire platform quacked. He hurriedly raised his hand, a minuscule amount of spiritual energy came out and the bell was destroyed. Argus Waska was affected by it, and as he spat out blood. Crackle, crackle. An uncontrollable amount of black lightning thundered, every eye and ear was affected by it. The source of it was situated on the champion golden platform. Peak Master, that's very unfair, said Ezra Zephyr. The bracelet on his wrist started to glow. But before he could do anything, a chilling voice came accompanied by murderous intent. Franco, what are you doing? The wrathful tone belonged to Master Antero, the acting head of Peak Masters. Master Franco didn't flinch, he respectfully bowed and replied. Master Antero, my peak is getting weaker. External body prowess is chosen by rare ones, and these two are treasures in my eyes. The match is already decided, the winner is clear. Any more delay would have caused a meaningless death. Antero looked and found Ethan unconscious. Franco quickly took out 2 pills from a spatial bag that hung on his waist. He inserted one in Ethan's mouth and gave the other to Argus. Rascal, you should have gone easy on him. He is a rare species, said Franco. Argus coughed and ate the pill. I did, and what species? He's just an overgrown human. Overgrown human? You musclehead, he has the blood of a giant race, he's a crossbreed. Have you ever seen an 8 feet 6 inches feet tall human? Oh. That was all Argus said. Master Franco looked at him and asked something that has been eating him for a while. You said, you went easy on him. How many gongs can you ring? He finally asked. 18 gongs. Argus replied. 18 gongs. The shock was visible on Franco's face. Argus confusingly asked. I know it's not much, His Majesty also scolded me for that, he said I'm dumb. But hey, I won, haha. Franco laughed spuriously and looked above at Ezra, who was smiling at him, completely opposite to his few seconds earlier reaction. If someone who rang 18 gongs is dumb in his eyes, then what would I be? He asked himself. Master Franco, the lonely 5th branch is calling you, said Master Usama as he chuckled. Yes, I apologize for causing a ruckus, safe Franco as he gently flew back to his seat. Ezra Zephyr looked at Argus Waska. The internal injury caused by the destruction of his spiritual technique was healed by the pill he ate. Even Ethan was breathing fine, despite the shattered chest of his. All those who stepped out of the platforms looked at the competitors fighting to get the platform. The dying dream in their hearts started to sparkle again. A slim guy wearing a sleeveless shirt was amongst the masses, watching all that with tears in his eyes. What will I do now? I can't go back, there will be no one welcoming back a failure. I'm going to join this sect even if I have to die a year later. It's better to die fighting as a martial master than live as a coward quitter. He wailed and jumped back towards the platforms. What will I do now? I can't go back, there will be no one welcoming back a failure. I'm going to join this sect even if I have to die a year later. It's better to die fighting as a martial master than live as a coward quitter. He wailed and jumped back towards the platforms. Seeing the sleeveless guy jump back towards the platform, many started to rethink their decision. But before they could move, a voice hit their ears. Don't be a fool like him, life is valuable, you can easily join another second-degree sect. Don't forget that Spirit Devouring Mountain is a second-degree sect, not first-degree. Treasure your life and rethink whatever you are thinking. The one who said that was Natalie, the cunning opportunist. But where will we go? You belong to a wealthy family, but the majority of us are not. We were trained by our clans so that they can use us later on, our return will bring us a callous death. A boy said. Return? Who will pay the mountain of wealth to travel continents just to pick us and bring us back? Spirit Devouring Mountain or another sect, our life is stuck in this narrow continent. A girl who was crying spoke next. Everyone was hearing them. Peak Master turned a blind eye to them. It was until then that the atrocious werewolf prince spoke again. What are you failures worried about? His question echoed. However, the fights for platforms didn't stop this time. Hearing Ezra was important as he told them many things, but conquering a platform was more important. Around 80% of you are stuck here in this remote continent with no folks and kins, am I right? Said Ezra. The stepped-out disciples looked at each other and slowly nodded one by one. Amongst them was Ash Beckham. The werewolf prince grinned. I'll give you a new home to live in and a powerful force to back you up. Would you be smart enough to accept it? Ha ha ha, that's our crown prince. Leaving not a single chance missed. Argus Waska giggled. On the second platform, Ravina blinked and looked at Ezra as she asked XYR, what powerful force is he talking about? Do you know anything? The next Jinn of the cult shook his head gently. How can I fathom what's inside Master's mind? But my supposition tells me that this powerful force is Master's homeland. Haha, that small kingdom at the edge of the continent. She laughed. XYR's eyes turned serious. Watch your mouth, feeble lassie, any more blasphemous words and I'll kill you. Ravina was bewildered. Blasphemous? Is he your god or what? Yes, he is my god. God of death. I was unaware that you guys have a powerful backing. Said Paul as he vertically swung his glaive. Clang. Zulfi blocked the attack with his sword. Sparkles jolted out to see the result of the clash. Our backing is the royal family and royal family only. Replied Zulfi Dimitri. Paul pushed his glaive and jumped back to make some distance. His eyes widened as he hesitatingly asked. Does that mean? Yes, His Majesty is inviting them to our kingdom. Zulfi replied with a proud smile gracing his face. How daring. Recruiting in the premises of sect, your prince has balls of steel. Praised Paul Channa. Zulfi squinted his face and made a foul face. I've never seen His Majesty's balls, I cannot answer your question. That was an idiom. Whatever, your glaive is dwindling. Focus on the fight. The Bloodfang Kingdom's smartest martial master smiled at Ezra's attempt. However, a sheer sense of trouble lingered in his heart as he saw the spiritual tree above in the sky. Your Majesty, you have played a very good card. But, will Spirit Devouring Sect forgive you after that? Ezra looked at the gathered disciples, giving a view of an army. Answer me, failures. Will you accept my generous offer? Asked Ezra. The masses looked at each other, waiting for one another to take the first deadly step. Amidst the wait, a voice came out. Where is that place? I will go there if you provide me with safety. I can work to earn money. It was the desperate crying girl who retorted Natalie earlier. Safety? You gugga-head hobos, what I'm offering is not mere safety but a place where you can train and continue your martial prowess. It slightly pales compared to Spirit Devouring Mountain. Uproar raised within the ranks of stood-out disciples. Where is that place? What's its name? Amongst the countless questions, one question dominated all as it resounded, burying all other voices under its echo. Where is the proof that this is not a scam? The voice belonged to Toria, the minion of Drake Tubble who left the 10th platform. I think you should take a look at. Ezra looked at him and recognized. He smiled and replied. I'm the product of it, I trained there and you can see the results. Not only me but almost every Naren disciple here trained there. The whispers arose as they all witnessed the might of Naren's disciples. Brother Ezra, where is that place? Ash Beckham asked after staying quiet for long. It's my homeland, Bloodfang Kingdom. Ezra said every word slowly, as if he wanted the masses to carve it in their mind. The Peak Masters looked at the first platform where two figures were present, one chained and pinned in midair, while others standing on the edge, peeking at the endless platforms below. I can't believe my eyes and ears, said Franco of Divine Demon Peak. This guy is showing us our true face, a core formation having the guts to steal our disciples. Master Bisma commented. What a disrespecting time to be alive, Master Aksama gave his thoughts. Every master spoke their will until Master Terror of Blood Slaughterer Peak, who stayed silent till that time, spoke again. There is something very special in that boy. Supreme Leader has his eyes on him. No matter how much you lower your voice frequency, Supreme Leader's ear is hearing everything. Be quiet, no one is more powerful and possessive than Supreme Leader within this sect. Everyone felt a chilling sensation in their spine. They calmed themselves and focused their attention on the fight. Ha ha ha. See, he's a fraud, said Toria. I'm not, just go towards the Guardians of Continent, meet Bapasha Ukwali and tell her to take you to the Bloodfang Kingdom. Once there, tell the King of Bloodfang Kingdom that Crown Prince Ezra Zephyr has sent you. You will never regret your decision. The prince boldly replied. The voices once again changed into whispers. The decision was not that simple. It can decide the future of them. They have learned a little bit about this continent and how it works. Naren is divided into 3 parts. Sovereign side, Guardian side, and Sect side. With the sovereign part being the weakest, if they were to join that side, then they won't be able to ever step on the Sect side. They had every right to think long about it. Can you take an oath? Said someone. Ezra Zephyr was caught off guard. He squinted his eyes and smirked. But this time, his smirk was not real. Fenrir, what do you say? He asked his most trusted companion, the Wolf of Norse. Take it, boy, the mother tree planted in your kingdom has evolved your land. The current Bloodfang is far more beneficial for martial prowess than this lowly sect. Fenrir replied. Ezra inwardly nodded his head and looked towards that certain guy. Yes, I am willing to take the oath. Huh. He is taking an OA. Suddenly the boy's voice stopped. Ezra flinched, and at a millisecond later he saw that everyone has been frozen. He jerked his head to see the platforms and found that even spiritual energy attacks were halted. Boy. Fenrir's voice came. Someone has stopped the time, said Fenrir. Stop the time. He quickly pivoted his face to see the Peak Master, but he found them frozen as well. Who could even free? Ezra stopped as a thought came to his mind. Yes, boy. Fenrir confirmed. It was at this time when Ezra felt a terrifying amount of spiritual energy. His body started to tremble. What is this? Boy. Fenrir yelled. Bolts of lightning cackled and shivering stopped harassing Ezra's body. The paralyzing spiritual energy withered, and Ezra could finally move. He sensed a presence. He angled his head to discern the presence. The direction took his sight towards the gigantic and enormous demon mountain. The upper half of the mountain was well hidden in the clouds. Ezra's gaze kept staring there when something descended from within the clouds. Ezra's body restarted trembling. He gritted his teeth and looked at that thing slowly flying towards him. What he saw was an addled shadow. Its face was clandestine and its body was blurry like the very definition of shadow. On the golden platform, the prince was in a sweat. His eyes fixated on the demonic mountain. A wavering smoky figure was hovering towards him. What he saw was an addled shadow. Its face was clandestine and its body was blurry like the very definition of shadow. The shadowy figure finally came closer. The nearer it came, the scarier its aura became. The shadow stood before Ezra, around 10 meters away. It looked huge, like a dark cave entrance. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes passed, yet the shadow didn't speak, neither it moved. Fenrir, should I ask him who is he? He asked Fenrir. Fenrir quickly retorted. No, the one who'll speak first will lose. It is obvious who is it. One thing is sure, that it doesn't have ill intentions towards you. Just stay alert and act clever. The dead silence carried out for half an hour until the shadow spoke. What is your intention? Ezra quickly covered his ears, blood popped out of his nose, and his mind became giddy. My intention? Ezra was perplexed. For the first time in his life he was witnessing such a godlike existence, that Shadow's martial prowess was way beyond his understanding. Boy, he is judging you. Act bold, don't show any cowardice. Fenrir advised. It's not lick dash. I know it's hard, you are standing in front of a spiritual transformation stage expert. It's tremendously hard for you, but still, hang in there, boy. Just a bit more, act tough. The prince squinted his eyes and gazed at the shadow. My intention? It's as clear as a lake. You came here to steal this sect's disciples. The shadow spoke, his voice was sky-tearing. That's wrong, you know it. Don't you, O mighty supreme leader? Not a single change occurred in the shadow. You are quite an interesting young man. The shadow said, this time his voice was soft like that of a normal man. Ezra's urge to shiver finally settled down. Jump in joy, boy. You have just kissed the Lady Death and survived. Said Fenrir. What? You said he doesn't have ill intentions. It was in presumption, haha. Ezra looked at the shadow and replied. Thank you, Supreme Leader. Answer me a few questions, Ezra. Asked the shadow. I am here, Supreme Leader. Ezra bowed. I have 5 questions to ask. If your answers please me, you will live. Even though the Supreme Leader hasn't shown any killing intent, Ezra felt a chill running through his spine. Ezra respectfully nodded his head. Ezra Zephyr was a smart youth, he faced troubles, discrimination and the world's true face at a young age. All those incidents evolved his young mind into a mature one, with the addition of the behemoth-like existence of Fenrir. No one in the lower realm could rival him unless an exception like Carlo or comes. Ezra knew that the Peak Masters were giving him leniency, he took that opportunity. He was told by Zephyr that he will be treasured if he shows enough power. This sect is akin to wildlife, where the strong can do whatever he wants with the weak. The powerful shadow spoke. First question, how did your kingdom and you reach this level in mere 5 years when you lived a life without martial spirit for 15 years? Second question, how did you manage to defeat an upper realm invader? Third question, why did you join my sect when you knew there will be a war? Fourth question, did you reveal the war news so that you can recruit the disciples for your kingdom? Last question, what is your relation with Bjorn Zephyr? The prince faintly smiled in response, but deep inside his chest, his heart was bobbing. These questions will make him naked, and all his secrets would be revealed. He was amazed by the amount of information the sect master has, from the rise of his kingdom to upper realm invaders. He knew everything, he even had the knowledge that Ezra was spiritless for 15 years. I think you should take a look at. Fenrir sensed Ezra's unease. Boy, you have me. Dealing with this fledgling is like yawning for me. Just say what I say to you, said the wolf. The prince regained his confidence and spoke. Let me answer you, Supreme Leader. Firstly, our kingdom found a hidden cave in our ancestors' graveyard. It was as spacious as a kingdom, it had treasures and pills of ancient times. Defeating Carlo was not easy, I cheated. He fought other geniuses and tired himself out during his bout with John Stark. I took the chance and killed him. All the 7 sacred sects joined hands to kill me, they found me a threat and I as well despise them. I joined your sect because of your war with Duo Mountain Peak. I believe that I can change the outcome of the war, this will help me vent my anger as well. Getting the glory of first-degree sect back won't be a dream anymore. And no, Supreme Leader. I didn't reveal the information so that I can recruit them, I did so that we can kick out cowards and possible traitors. All the remaining ones are those with iron guts and steel nerves. But, all the failures would either join other sects or live their lives normally. Then why not send them to the other side of the continent, to my kingdom that still needs talented men, this way our rival sects would not get these disciples. As for Bjorn Zephyr, I am his 52nd generation descendant. The prince answered. Every answer had a solid point, no one can go and see the cave in the ancestor graveyard in Bloodfang Kingdom. Guardians of Continent would tear them apart and all of the other kingdoms or empires are keenly spied on by Bloodfang Kingdom, any infiltration will be caught. Carlo's fight was seen by none, even the envoys of the 7 first-degree sects couldn't see what happened inside the Spirity Tower. That's why everyone believed Jon Stark won the first prize, just because he said so. If those who were present couldn't discern it, then how would Supreme Leader, who can only trust his information resources, would be? Ezra's remaining answers were very simple, yet they had a big role that the world will know later. Supreme Leader calmly inspected Ezra. He couldn't find any psychological clues which can be used to detect his lies. The prince shook his head. Absolutely not, Supreme Leader. Have faith in me. A chuckle was released by the shadow. Haha, faith? I don't have faith in you, not you, not in any other disciples in the new batch. Then why didn't you kill me? Why did you stop Peak Master of Blood Slaughterer Peak from killing me? Ezra questioned. For the first time, the shadow was surprised. Explain, how will you defeat Duo Mountain Peak? The prince grinned, and inside him, the monstrous wolf of Norse grinned as well, as if they were itching to be asked this question. The prince started the explanation. After a while, Supreme Leader looked at Ezra with deep, endless eyes. If you are as capable as you said, then I will give you complete support. But if it is just a farce of yours, a yucky attempt to gain privilege, then you can understand the outcome. I am breaking the rules just because we are in a dire situation. He said and vanished. Bjorn Zephyr destroyed this sect and snatched its glory, and now his descendant is protecting this sect and claiming to regain glory. Haha, fate is a funny thing. Just as he vanished, his voice resounded. Ezra's eyes widened. He remembers. Do they have records of the fight? Most probably, boy. Spirit Devouring sect was strongest at that time. Maybe the truth is only revealed in front of sect masters, said Fenrir. On the top of the gigantic mountain, a pavilion was made. A man was leaning on a wooden rocking chair. He looked satisfied. A smile made his handsome face more handsome. He had short white hair and dark gray skin. His ears were long and pointy. He was clearly a member of the dark elf race. He was enjoying and appreciating the layer of clouds beneath him, covering the lower half of Demonic Mountain like a blanket. Master, you look quite happy today, said a creature. His voice was raspy. It had the wings of a bat and a very horrifying face with bow-like horns popping out. He wore a strange shell-like armor. He belonged to the demon race, a tribe named Kindred. I have found hope, the dark elf replied without looking at him. What hope, master? I saw you favoring that charlatan. I don't see him special in any way, said the Kindred. My hyper-disciple Zebos, that's why you are weakest amongst the seven. I see the glimpse of my senior in him, replied the dark elf. The demon pondered a bit and replied. Master, by senior, are you perhaps referring to Master Jason Feliter? The dark elf said nothing and smiled as he rocked his chair back and forth. When his sword parried, he went with the motion and spun in the very right direction the sword was parried. With additional momentum made, he swung and raised his right leg. Paul saw that too, but he misjudged two things. 1. He believed the speed of a spinning kick would be slower than the speed of his glaive slicing his opponent open. But he quickly found that the speed was fast, much faster than he had possibly thought. This could only mean that he has practiced it numerous times. Despite witnessing the speed, he still went for the attack because of the second misjudgment he made. He thought that the kick would be aimed at his chest or face, and yes, it could have perfectly hit him. But the problem with that was his reach. A glaive was twice longer than a leg. He could cut him while keeping a safe distance. But to his misfortune, Zulfi was not aiming at his body, but aimed at his glaive. Paul quietly looked at Zulfi. He was bitterly smiling. He quickly raised his hands and cupped them into fists. Come on, he said. Zulfi looked at him. He removed his foot from the glaive and stepped back. Pick it up, he said. Paul's eyes widened. Is he a fool? He could win now. Paul lost his weapon and was now very vulnerable. He could only conclude two possibilities. What is it? He asked, to which Zulfi squinted his eyes in a confused manner. Are you one of those wannabe benevolent warriors who don't lay their hands on unarmed people, the ones who yap about equality, honor, and justice? Or, you belong to the category of those crazy battle maniacs who give their opponent every privilege just to face them at their peak. They often break their physical limitation by putting themselves on the edge of death. Which one are you? Zulfi Dmitri simply shook his head. None. Paul was puzzled again. Then why are you doing it? To humiliate me? No. Zulfi's reply was short and direct. The smile started to fade from Paul's face. Then answer me. After staying silent for a few seconds, Zulfi Dmitri opened his mouth. I am nothing but a sort of my liege. Paul's jaw dropped. What in the sweet heaven has it to do with the question I asked? I am His Majesty's sword, my every action will define him in some manner. I am simply giving you your weapon so that you cannot say anything like he won because I lost my glaive. It will be a stain to His Majesty's sword, which I, in my life, will never tolerate. He replied. Paul looked at him with his mouth agape. He blinked a few times in disbelief before slowly moving towards his glaive. He picked it up and looked at Zulfi Dmitri. You are an arrogant fool. Zulfi looked at his opponent. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Thinking a bit more, he opened it once again and replied. I am arrogant, yes. But I am not a fool. My liege has ordered me to never fight a losing battle. I think you should take a look at. He didn't say that his liege told him or advised him, he said he ordered him. Seeing the sheer level of his loyal. That means regardless of whether he wants or not, he cannot fight a battle which he thinks he'll lose. Does that mean? Yes, you are weak. A thunderbolt hit Paul Channa. He was a proud genius. I am not weak. A haunting memory assaulted his mind. There was a lie in the story he told Zulfi. It was not a lie that his family didn't treasure him, but his siblings. But it was not because he was a less genius than his peers, but it was because of a certain incident. On one fateful night, the mansion of the Channa clan was attacked by their rival clan. There was an all-out war. Paul's mother was a very beautiful lady whom every man in the city dreamt about. But there was a man she always loved. He was the father of Paul, head of the Channa clan. They secretly married each other. But in public, he announced that she was a concubine. Because of political influence he couldn't accept her in public, but Paul's mother never minded that. All she wanted was the love and care of her husband, which was abundantly given to her. On the day of the attack, the head of the Channa clan fought with his rival and eventually killed him. The massacre lasted till the rays of the sun fell on the land and twinkled on the blood of the dead. The head suddenly thought of his beloved wife and dashed towards her chamber. But what he found made his eyes bleed. His beautiful wife was completely naked and blindfolded, and a man of his rival clan was above her. His hands pressed her blossoms while his thrusts resounded in the chamber. The man felt a presence and quickly moved and jerked his head. He saw the head of the Channa clan. The man knew his fate has been sealed, but then a sinister thought appeared in his mind. Haha, this is my 7th time. What a lovely night it is. How do you feel, my love? He said as he bit the cherry on her soft round cake. Ah. Ah. I can't talk. Hurry up, ah. That was all he heard from his wife. The bewildered clan had extended his hand and the man flew into his hand. Yeah, kill me. Haha, my seed is already inside her. The man laughed. Soon, others came as well, including Paul's elder brother. Put it back, ah, I'm not done yet. She moaned. The son witnessed everything, the naked man and her mother's lewd behavior. Put this man in jail, don't you dare to touch him. Ordered the head. The son gritted his teeth in disgust and did as he was ordered. Ezra stood wordlessly on the golden platform, drenched in his very own sweat. He gazed at other platforms. The pausing time suddenly resumed, and all those halted action and spiritual techniques frozen in mid-air became active again. The quietness changed into chaos as the mayhem of thousands of crushing bones and clashing metals attacked Ezra's ears. He glimpsed at the floating tree on which behemoth-ranked masters were sitting. To his shock, there seems to be no change in their expressions. The prince pivoted his head and squinted his eyes as he dwelt himself in deep ponder. On the branches of a giant spiritual energy tree, Master Aksama gave a side-eye glance to Master Antero. "You felt it?" he questioned. To which, the master of arcane wizardry Peak nodded his head. "That was a neoteric attempt of Supreme Leader." Aksama mumbled. "SSHSH." Master Antero hushed and set his focus on the platforms. These were not the only masters who understood what just happened, they simply ignored it or were trying to. Their eyes were now fixated on the young man in black, standing on the edge of the golden platform. The uncommon amount of sudor and his paled face gave them a hint of what just happened. However, amongst the 7 leaders of 7 peaks, there was one who was unknown to it. It was the man who represented Alchemic Rune Peak, oblivious to anything. He kept looking at the platforms, his face was desperate and gloomy, as if he never belonged to the place where he was at. From the army of disciples who stepped out, a boy spoke. "Will you really take an oath?" Ezra's eyes twitched, he remembered what was happening before the sudden arrival of the Supreme Leader. He calmed himself and replied in the same domineering manner. "Yes, why wouldn't I? I am a man of my word." He grinned, but deep down in his corner there remained a sliver of uneasiness. "I'll take an oath, you will be surprised the moment you set your foot on the land of Bloodfang Kingdom." Once again, the army of disciples fell silent, and a few seconds later, a humming series of whispers followed, resembling them to a giant buzzing business of flies. Clang clang. Zulfi and Paul were in a heated battle, and the colliding sound of sword versus glaive resounded in the vicinity of their platform. Paul Channa wielded a golden glaive, his natural good looks and decent level of attire gave him a royal look. The constant smile on his face, that didn't budge even after feeling a long sword almost kissing his neck, was eye-catching. He wore unique grade armor and braces, protecting his chest and limbs. Be that as it may, his neck, head, shoulders, and thighs were vulnerable. Contrary to him, his opponent was in full armor. Zulfi Dimitri wore a special grade set of light armor, even his shoulders and thighs were protected. With the exceptions of neck and joints, of course, he wore a light armor, not a heavy one like Shifa Pista. The helmet Zulfi Dimitri wore was covering his entire head, leaving a T-shaped opening for his eyes and mouth. The entire armor cooperated with his long sword, Paladin's Pledge. Apart from that, another notable thing in Zulfi's armor was a white-colored cloak, attached to his shoulders. It flattered each time they swung their weapons. I think you should take a look at. In terms of armaments, Paul Channa was already defeated. But, how could a man who survived in an infamous and strong clan with all odds against him admit defeat? Zulfi swung his Paladin's Pledge and Paul waved his Reverie light. Clang. Another deafening clash occurred, the impact of powerful chi forced them into making distance. Both special tier weapons vibrated by the bout, and Zulfi dashed forward. He thrust his sword, aiming at the neck of Paul. The latter held the glaive masterly, the blade of the glaive was facing the feet of Zulfi, and it was at an acute angle. With one hand slightly below the end of the glaive's rod and the other at the center of it. Paul quickly jerked his hand, and the rod of the glaive hit the incoming sword's left side. The sword was pushed towards the right side, the thrust had a reasonable amount of power backing it. With the sword parried, Zulfi lost his balance. With his sword out of the way, his body was open to be attacked. Paul smiled as he saw an opening, he quickly wheeled his hand, gripped the end of the glaive with one hand and placed the palm of his other below the rod, a little ahead of the middle. He glided forward a bit and pushed the end of the rod down while gently jerking the palm upwards. The blade of the glaive, which was facing the feet of Zulfi, cleaved the air as it ascended. The target was to cut the imbalanced swordsman from his abdomen to his chest. Dom. Huh. Paul's eyes widened. Before the glaive could reach his abdomen, Zulfi stomped the glaive's rod slightly below the blade and shoved it into the ground. Before Paul could even think of a counter, the off-white long sword was smiling at his neck. He let go of the glaive and jolted backwards. SWIISSSH. A thin line appeared on his throat and soon, the line turned red with his blood. Paul touched his neck and saw the blood. He smiled, but this time, he smiled in bewilderment. I thought my blood would be golden. He chuckled and looked at Zulfi again. My apologies, I underestimated you. Paul was sapient, there was no flaw in his planning. However, Zulfi was not a mundane swordsman. He already saw the position of the glaive and detected a possible counter, the moment his sword was parried. No. Even before the sword was parried, he knew what would happen. It was all within his calculation. He was a didactic and seasoned swordsman. He sent his sword with a reasonable power, not too little, not too much. He knew that the best way to handle a thrust is to parry it because it would make the swordsman lose his balance, thus, opening an attack spot. The head slowly moved towards his naked wife. She reeked of that man. The head removed the blindfold. His wife was in a dizzy state. Honey, come, love me. Her eyes were in tears. She wanted to say something else, but her tongue said something else. The head stood there as a statue, motionless and emotionless. Phha. A slap on her cheek. The slap was so hard that her face was disfigured. After that day, the head never saw his wife again. 9 months later, Paul was born. He didn't kill her or throw her out, perhaps he was allowing her to live as a punishment. She pleaded numerous times, but the head never even looked at her. This is your son, I swear upon my martial spirit. I was about to inform you, but they attacked the mansion that day. He forcefully inserted a pill in my mouth and I, sobs. You can ask Elder Mink, he checked me and confirmed it that night, he knows the truth. She begged. A young teenager came forward. His eyes gazed and tore apart Paul's mother. The teenager spoke. Mother, Elder Mink died that night. How shameful you are, picking the name of the dead. How come all of your witnesses are dead? You should have died that day. He glanced at her side, a 3-year-old lad with golden hair, confusingly clenching her mother's robe. Along with that bastard. He spat. That teenager was the elder brother of Paul, the one who came that night. The small Paul looked at her crying mother. Believe me, believe me. She mumbled and sobbed. Mothel, I believe you, mother, I believe you, said the innocent Paul, unaware of anything. She stared daggers at him. It is you ruined my life. Die. She cried and squeezed Paul's neck. Emma Mothel. She tried to end his life, but couldn't. A mother is still a mother. Paul was humiliated almost every day. They taunted him and cursed him. Even his own brother told him how his mother did that infidelity, forgetting the fact that she was his mother as well. There were also his half-siblings, way crueler than his brother. All the blame ended up on Paul. Just like that time passed, when Paul was 17. Her mother finally committed suicide and left a note. Paul, you are not an illegitimate son, you are the blood of the Channa family. But, you are weak, you are weak, you are weak. Only if you were stronger, things would have been different. I never loved you as a mother should, and I am ashamed of it. By the time I realized, we were so distant that it was impossible to rekindle our relationship, and for that sin, I am committing suicide. But you are weak now, become strong, stronger than your father, and then avenge yourself. Don't avenge me, but avenge yourself. You are weak, you are weak, you are weak. She wrote that phrase so many times that Paul started to grow hatred. Every time someone called him "you are weak," he would lose his calm composure. Slowly the Channa clan understood that Paul was a genius, more than anyone in the clan. And one day, he was called by the family head, by the father he never saw in his entire life. He was guided by the mansion guards, and slowly followed them. He checked and remembered as much as possible. They passed a hallway, numerous people stood there, their arrow-like eyes piercing Paul's heart. At the end of the hallway, a huge door was located. The guards knocked a few times, and it was opened from the inside. Krecch. The dry door cried in agony as it was opened. Paul's eyes landed on the man sitting on the front big throne-like seat. I think you should take a look at Hey! Zulfi cried. Huh. Ah. Paul Channa came back to his senses. Zulfi looked at him expressionless and said, "Wipe your tears and don't space out next time or I will cut you down." Paul flinched, he touched his face only to find that it was wet from his tears. He slowly raised his glaive, gave it a look and stared at Zulfi Dmitri. The atmosphere around him changed. "I will show you the consequences of calling me weak." Something changed within Paul Channa. Zulfi could feel it, but he didn't understand what it was. It was at this time when Paul marched forward, he bolted like golden thunder. With glaive in hand he closed the distance rather quickly. Zulfi's eyes widened. "Fast," he whispered to himself. He clenched his sword, tightened the grip and prepared himself for the incoming blitzkrieg. Paul arrived at his destination and within a minuscule amount of a second, he swung his glaive. It was a simple horizontal swing, a glaive's blade tearing the air, carving his way towards the final target. Nothing was strange about the attack, or that's what Zulfi thought before he blocked the attack. Bang. A destructive amount of power was packed behind the swung, his hands were knocked. However, luckily, the sword remained in his hands. He quickly stopped himself from falling by stepping backwards. He stood and looked at Paul, who was right in front of him, attempting another deadly swing. Zulfi quickly jerked and swung as well, power versus power, blade versus blade. A direct confrontation of two swings. Cluunngg. The noise emitted from the bout was thrice, if not, twice louder than the usual ones they produced. The paladin's pledge against the reverie light, both special tier weapons, vibrated. Before one side started to overpower, Paul Channa was dominating Zulfi Dmitri. Kang. With a strange metallic sound, the two weapons separated. Reverie light was still in Paul's hands while Paladin's pledge was knocked into the sky. For the first time ever since Zulfi Dmitri held the sword, it was the first time where the sword was blown away from his fists. Before he could say or speak, a kick came from Paul's side. Bomb. It hit the chest of Zulfi Dmitri, throwing him away as his back glided on the ground. He quickly flipped and solidified his standing. Paul Channa bashed the end of his glaive on the ground and stared daggers at Zulfi Dmitri and said, "Pick it up. The table has been turned." Zulfi Dmitri was bewildered, seeing his precious sword bestowed upon him by none other than the royal crown prince fall far from him. He couldn't gather his thoughts as his eyes shrank. "Pick it up, there won't be a second time," declared Paul Channa. His words echoed in Zulfi's ears. He stood up to take the sword. But before his gaze could lead him towards the sword, it changed its path. Now his gaze was moving in an upward direction. It reached the second platform but didn't halt there and ascended until the golden platform was in sight. The remorseful gaze finally paused. The man it landed on was none other than Ezra Zephyr. The prince looked back at his subordinate. The proud swordsman was shaking, and there was an obvious look of disappointment he saw in his liege's eyes. In the next second, Ezra turned his eyes away as if he was saying to Zulfi that he is no longer related to him. A mountain of shame fell upon him, but in the next moment burning anger ignited within the heart of Zulfi Dmitri. He bolted towards Paladin's pledge and grabbed it. And in the next moment, he dashed towards the glaive-wielding youth. Clang. Another loud clash resounded as the bright sparkles waltzed in midair. Zulfi stepped and carefully swung his sword. His eyes were red and furious. Both individuals who were showcasing charismatic chivalry with their geniality duel were now fighting an ugly battle, completely contrary to their former bout. In their eyes, there was no respect for each other. Only two things could be seen within their oculus: anger and murdering intent. Clang. Another metallic sound resounded as their clash pushed them into the distance. Zulfi wiggled his fingers around the sword's hilt while Paul soothingly swung his glaive. Zulfi stared daggers at Paul. "How dare you humiliate me in the presence of His Highness?" Paul was taken aback, but before he could run his thoughts to answer, a familiar voice came. "What bullshit is that? You meant to say he can humiliate you in my absence?" Ezra Zephyr's voice was direct and loud. Zulfi Dmitri flinched. "Your mage, dash. "Shut up, you piece of useless shit," the prince retorted. Zulfi was startled and the entire mass of people turned their gazes to the loud prince, with the exception of platform combatants, who were too busy to listen to anything. The spectators deemed Zulfi as a loyal figure, one who could only be found in novels, always standing at the side of his tyrant liege. Meanwhile, Ezra Zephyr was the tyrant liege in their eyes. One who always pushes his subordinates to the edge of the cliff without appreciating a single drop of their blood and sweat. "You are no more a resident of Bloodfang Kingdom," said the prince. Shifa Pista and Argus Waska all looked at their prince in surprise. However, their Gale Arms and XYR seemed to guess the cause of Ezra's sudden umbrage. "I think you should take a look at." Hearing that, Zulfi's eyes widened. Your Majesty. What wrong have I done?" Zulfi Dimitri was an excellent swordsman, and not only that, he was one of the main men in Ezra's army. His commanding sense and domineering attitude kept everyone in their respective place. Some of Naren's disciples feared Zulfi while the rest respected him, but none hated him because of his social policies. And there was one thing that everyone knew, even those who met Zulfi for mere moments. That thing was his dedicated loyalty towards the royal family of Bloodfang Kingdom, especially the prince. When it comes to Ezra Zephyr, he was true to the end. He would kill, he would die, and he would sacrifice his most treasured thing in the name of Ezra Zephyr. But now, the same Ezra Zephyr was banishing him from his homeland. This caused so many people to question their choice of joining Bloodfang Kingdom. If he can exile his most loyal subject, then what would he do to them? That question disturbed the chain of thoughts of many who gave a ponder to his recruitment. The prince looked at Zulfi Dimitri with a disgusted look and replied, "There is no place for an angelic ninny in my ranks, all I need are ruthless killers. Your inane mistake has insulted the name of Bloodfang. I was wrong about you." It was at this time that he understood what wrong he did. The prince looked at the bystanders. There were many of Naren's disciples who secured a platform but weren't aware of what was happening. For the sake of them, the prince continued, "I believe that I carved my teachings deep in all of you, but you proved me erroneous. Only a fool would give his enemy a second chance. You should have cut his throat the moment his glaive left his hand. Unarming the enemy and killing him is an art of duel, not an act of disrespect." "You said that would cause me disrespect?" "You mistaken buffoon, that would have brought me tremendous joy. But now, I'm annoyed to my limit. Go to hell, I have nothing to do with you anymore, you are on your own." The prince then turned his sight to the other platforms to observe. His eyes landed on the second floor where XYR and Ravina were facing each other for a moment. He gave XYR a satisfied smile and turned his head. Zulfi saw that his liege was satisfied with his rival. His heartbeat raised and sounded like a temple's bourdon. The rivalry between Zulfi and XYR was started by Zulfi himself. After seeing a powerful martial master joining his liege's side, a fear ignited within his heart. What if he takes his position of unofficial second in command by official means? But what he feared most was a nightmare he had where Ezra Zephyr favored XYR and trusted his back to him than to Zulfi Dimitri. If his nightmare was an imaginary house, then Ezra's satisfied smile was the signal that the imaginary house is under construction and soon will become a real house. On the floating spiritual tree, the peak masters were quiet and observant. They keenly looked at the ongoing battles on the platform to see which seedlings should be bloomed at their peak. Naturally, the top platforms were given exceptional attention. "The youngster is vicious but true," Mater Bisma commented. The other masters nodded their heads, especially Master Terror. He seemed fascinated by Zulfi Dimitri's swordsmanship. In a life-and-death battle such chivalry is placed next to death. Today that boy with the bright light long sword has learned something big. But... He paused and a worry appeared on his face. He squinted his eyes and continued. "The way he learned that could cause irreversible destruction to his mind. He is way too loyal to that arrogant prince of a remote kingdom. He'll either change into a murdering swordsman like that prince of his wanted him to be, or he will be mentally crippled. Either way, it's bad." Master Bisma spoke again. A small chuckle released from the sixth branch. How is being a murdering swordsman bad? What similarity have you found between an exceptionally talented swordsman who knows how to kill and a mentally crippled person that you came to this conclusion? Both are psychopaths, and the same. Master Bisma gave her answer with a waving hand. Master Argus stayed quiet for a while, before giving a bitter smirk and said, "You young people are so soft. I sometimes wonder if I'm still in the same sect that I joined in my youth. No wonder we are at the edge of destruction." The facial expression of Bisma drastically changed. "Master Argus, what did you mean by that?" She felt as if the master of Zenith Ghost Peak was accusing her. He shook his head and replied, "Don't act like you just came here yesterday, you know all too well what I'm talking about. We were at the peak. The competition within the sect was so tough that even we were unaware whether we'll see the next morning's sun or not. But look at us now, soft and caring. We once produced monsters capable of disturbing other big powers. But as soon as Master Jason Fellator vanished, we crumbled. All young geniuses were assassinated in front of our eyes, our position was snatched, and here we are naively saying that a murdering swordsman and mentally crippled are the same things. Name one swordsman who hasn't murdered anyone?" He looked at Master Terror of Blood Slaughterer Peak and asked, "Master Terror, you are the youngest Peak Master and an excellent swordsman. Care to tell us how many talented men and women you have killed?" The Master of Blood Slaughterer Peak stayed silent and didn't bother to answer the obvious, seeing that Master Bisma pouted, trying to act innocent as he said, "It was a slip of my tongue. A murdering swordsman is as different to a mentally crippled man as a day is to night. Gosh. You guys have no common sense. You are the master of the second strongest peak, your every word carries a tremendous weight, so consider what words your mouth spouts in front of so many people," Master Argus said. Master Bisma gritted her teeth and hissed, "I apologize, please forgive my insolence, oh just Master of Word Detecting Peak. I think you should take a look at PFT." Master Franco of Divine Demon Peak snickered, and shortly later the other Peak Masters joined him. Master Bisma unintentionally brightened their mood even though Master Argus was smirking. The Master of Colleen Evil Peak was not just hellishly strong, but she possessed an otherworldly beauty, and despite being old for more than 200 years she still looked like a 22 years lassie in her prime, qualified to steal any living man's heart. The Lady Master was the Peak Master of the second strongest peak, a peak solely for lassies. Be that as it may, in terms of martial prowess she was sixth strongest. A lot of her prowess was halted because she paid an astounding amount of resources to keep her youth, allowing her junior Master Terror to surpass her. The peak ranking of the Spirit Devouring Mountain is decided by the performances of peaks. The ranking can be changed at the end of every month. With Alchemic Rune Peak at last, the ranking hasn't changed in the past 15 years. With a smile on their faces, the old masters once again looked at the platforms. The eyes of Master Antero glittered like gems at the sight of the second platform. A once-in-a-lifetime anomaly appeared in front of his eyes. How could he let go of such a preeminent genius? Yes, his eyes were glued on none other than XYR. But who's the one XYR was facing? Ravina Ingale. Another distinguished genius from a powerful background. That match was so captivating that even Master Aksama Ingale was forced to spectate it despite the fact that none of the two participants were good for his peak. Boom. An explosion occurred in the sky as steam floated in mid-air. Before merging with the air itself, Ravina Ingale was sweating. Her face had anger all over it and she was gritting her teeth. Even a naive would understand that she was frustrated and inordinately upset. Her opponent on the other hand was calm. He had sweat all over his dragon-symboled clothes. However, the Straw Hat Man wielding a scythe was harmonious. He took big breaths to maintain his posture. The angry Ravina Ingale could no longer hold it and turned her head upwards. "Ezra," she cried with every bit of her power. The air reverberated. The Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom was looking somewhere far where other platforms were situated. The sudden cry pulled his undivided attention. "Why are you shouting?" "I'm not deaf," he retorted. Why are you disrespecting me?" Ravina Ingale questioned with a roaring voice. Her lips trembled. Anger? Frustration? As to why they trembled, no one knew. The prince squinted his eyes and went into a ponder before replying shortly later. I don't recall disrespecting you in any way. Perhaps you are mistaken. Ravina couldn't bear it anymore, her entire body shivered terribly, and the spiritual energy around her started to vibrate. She looked straight into her eyes and said in an ordering manner, "Tell your pet dog to fight me seriously." The lady in red, with a blazing whip in her hands, gritted her teeth as she uttered, "Tell your pet dog to fight me seriously." The prince looked at XYR, who calmly stood there in a defensive position. He's not a pet but a genius sorcerer. Even if we consider him as a pet, then that only makes you worse, someone who couldn't even defeat a pet dog. The words of the werewolf prince acted like poisonous arrows that pierced Ravina's chest. How dare you? She bellowed. Crackle. A black bolt of lightning flashed and let out a thundering noise. Ravina in Gale flinched, the anger in her eyes haltingly faded and fear coagulated her face. Lower your damn voice, Lady in Gale. Don't forget the fact that it isn't your power that strengthens you to act high and mighty, but it's me who is allowing you to do so. Otherwise, you are a lot weaker than Drake Tubble. The last sentence of the prince forced Ravina to look at the other side of the golden platform. A man who once wore a clean white dress was now soaked in his own blood. The clean white dress was soaked in dress, and he was desperately trying to break abnormal spiritual chains which pinned him in midair. She gulped all her naive thoughts and calmed down. Only a numbskull would inflict his anger on someone stronger than him, and fortunately Ravina wasn't a numbskull. As for XYR. The prince gave a tentative look to her opponent and said, "Alright, I'll make your wish come true. One attack, both of you will attack each other with your most powerful spiritual technique. Whoever manages to come out unscathed will be the winner. Are you okay with this?" He asked Ravina, and before she could answer, he turned his eyes to the 7th platform where the chubby pretty lady in a blue dress stood with a gleeful face. "Because I can't allow my subordinate to kill you, how will I face Mahi then? You know she treasures you." The prince smiled. Mahi in Gale's face turned red and she hurriedly covered it with her hands. On the spiritual tree in midair, the old man on the 3rd branch cackled. "How amusing. Such a daring lad, flirting and threatening my descendants at the same time and in front of me at that. Highly impressive." Master Aksama commented on his thoughts. Ravina in Gale shot her glance at Ezra Zephyr. "I accept the terms." "Very well, you shall attack first, and you." He turned his eyes towards XYR and continued. "Do whatever you can to save yourself." "As you wish, master." The Jinn of the cult replied. Seeing that from afar, the majority of disciples who stepped out could only drop their jaws. How a young junior who has yet to be an official disciple of the sect is ordering around other participants. And the fun part was that he did that in front of the Peak Master. What are Peak Masters? The existences who stand at the very top of the sect, consisting of 100,000 disciples. "Who would have thought that a mere lad would act in that way before us," said Bisma. Master Franco gave a fake smile and replied, "What's more irritating is that we can't do shit to him." The disciples who were watching from afar bit their nails and pulled their hair. They did everything they could to figure out what was happening, but to their misfortune, they found nothing. At the 2nd platform, 2 martial masters were gazing at each other with killing intent. Ravina in Gale exhaled steam from her mouth. She looked different. The temperature rose around her. The spiritual energy she released from her body was denser and hotter. Her hands moved, her palms raised and looked towards the sky. She closed her, and her red dress started to flutter. Her figure looked like a praying statue. "Gamma layer skill, flight of phoenix," she muttered. "Whoshh." The hot spiritual energy that she was constantly releasing suddenly changed into a giant inferno. The flames started to rise and gather at a certain spot in the sky, right above where he was. Gradually, the gathered flames began to form a shape, a strange-shaped fowl, fierce and flaring. "Impossible, how did she learn that?" someone from far away cried. Curious and confused, other disciples jolted their heads towards him. "You recognize the spiritual technique? What kind of spiritual technique is this?" Hey! Enough with this damn suspense, give us an answer, the other disciples yelled one after another. The guy who identified this technique spat in one breath. Peel Tier Gamma Layer Skill, Flight of Phoenix, one of the very few spiritual techniques that are highly destructive and can solely be practiced by a fire-attributed martial cultivator. The disciples fell silent, and before they could speak again, the man continued. But this spiritual technique carries a flaw. A flaw? Such a skill has a flaw? Hey bud, can you tell us the flaw the skill has? The man stared at the unfinished burning phoenix in the sky and replied. It needs a lot of time to complete. The more time it takes, the more spiritual energy it will absorb. The level of destruction can be guessed from the amount of spiritual energy stored within the phoenix. During that time, the martial master is vulnerable. He cannot change his posture, otherwise the spiritual technique will blast in midair and cause an injury to the caster. I think you should take a look at. The mass of disciples gasped as they heard it, and now their eyes turned towards the other figure that stood on the second platform. The man who was going to face such a disastrous attack. Why isn't he attacking her now? Maybe he doesn't know about the flaw. I don't believe that Straw Hat guy is very peculiar and powerful. There is more to his reason for not attacking. At that point, another female disciple spoke. Is he allowing her on purpose so that he can please Ezra Zephyr by winning with flying colors? The eyes of listeners widened. That's an acceptable theory. For some unknown reason, the majority conclude their perplexed discussion by agreeing with that girl. BBIIZZZZZZ. The burning flames converged and formed a complete image of a phoenix. A giant bird appeared in the sky. The entirety of his body was made from nothing but fire. When the eyes of the populace were stuck on the phoenix, the ground started to freeze. Now it was the time for XYR to shine. His right side froze with frost as chilling spiritual energy released from his right. Unlike Reina in Gale, who could use chi, XYR was a martial sorcerer and used mana. The ground was completely frozen, however, the ice could not freeze the land around Ravina. In Gale, leaving a gap of 1 meter between Ravina and ice. XYR calmly stood as a wall of ice started to build around him. 1 meter, 3 meters, 7 meters, the wall stopped growing when it reached the height of 13 meters. What in the hell is that now? I know as much as the next guy. These people are goddamn crazy, pulling out spells and skills that we don't even know about. A disciple looked at the guy who identified Ravina in Gale's spiritual technique and asked. Hey man, what do you think? Do you recognize this one as well? To which that young man simply said. Beats me. Spiritual tree. And here I thought that my descendant might actually win. Master Aksama sighed. The peak master of Divine Demon giggled and replied. There is a chance, it's 50-50. I wouldn't buy that, I have seen this spell. Someone who died long ago used to cast that spell, its defense is impregnable. Master Aksama said, his tone was serious and sincere. Oh ho! To make old man Aksama praise him, that guy must be very exceptional. Master Bisma spouted. Master Argus nodded his head. He indeed was very exceptional. I wonder where he would have been now if he was alive. Wow, another old guy is praising him. Who exactly was he? It piqued the curiosity of Bisma. At this point the other younger peak masters looked at them with a side eye. The quiet master of arcane wizardry peak finally spoke. He was younger than us, yet none of us could defeat him. He had the moniker of Winter Beast. He overpowered the current 3 peak masters in that time. Now imagine how strong he would be today if he was alive. The eyes of the other masters widened. Master Antero, Master Aksama and Master Argus were the strongest amongst the peak masters, and that dead guy had beaten them despite being younger than them. So that spiritual technique was used by him? Bisma asked. Master Antero nodded his head. His face was decorated with a jolly smile when he slowly uttered the name of spiritual technique. 6th circle spell, Winter Fort. The spiritual energy kept vacuuming from both martial masters. Ravina's spiritual energy went into the phoenix that flapped its fire wings in the sky, while XYR's spiritual energy was entering the walls of the fort. The spiritual energy kept escaping from both martial masters. Ravina's spiritual energy went into the phoenix that flapped its fire wings in the sky, while XYR's spiritual energy was entering the walls of the fort. In the middle of the air, a phoenix was burning, and with each passing second its size grew, and so did the flaming spiritual energy around it. Opposing to the phoenix, a giant cold fort came into existence. The 13 meters tall four walls that protected XYR from all directions were getting thicker and thicker as more spiritual energy was poured into it. The closed eyes of Ravina in Gale opened, red and raged in anger. She opened her rose-resembling lips and uttered, "Come out, yell aim. Bearer." A burst of spiritual energy gushed out of her body as an entity of pyre emerged out. It was a shapeless being, a spirit with features of nothing but scorching conflagration. Soon after, 7 orbs appeared behind Ravina in Gale and started to rotate. The eyes of bystanders widened with the emergence of Ravina's martial spirit, a spirit which is a manifestation of fire attribute. No wonder that she was so fluent with fire-based spiritual techniques. The phoenix above the sky suddenly bulged into double its original size, and the tyranny of its flames grew tremendously as it flapped its blazing wings with sun-like eyes stuck on its prey, XYR. Meanwhile, the Straw Hat sorcerer was not wasting his time. The spiritual energy stopped feeding the fort walls and now created a tomb-like layer around the fort. The layer was akin to a thin icy blanket. The spiritual energy formed countless snowflakes, each connected in the air to strengthen the layer. All of this was part of the skill. There was a reason behind the praise of peak masters. This spiritual technique was rare. Not any average ice-attributed sorcerer would be able to master it. However, XYR was not an average sorcerer, and apart from that, he had a legendary tutor named Ezra Zephyr who helped him master this piece of art. Soon, a layer was formed, and in the next moment, the snowflakes started to make another layer above the already built one. Seeing that, the old peak masters looked astounded. "That's beyond exceptional, 2 layers. He mastered 2 layers within the time span of 3 months," said Master Argus of Zenith Ghost Peak. Hearing no response from the other 2 old masters, he was forced to look at them. Both old men had different expressions. Master Aksama had a tense look on his face. Despite the fact that he was hiding it from others, Master Argus looked through his fake expression. He was probably worried about his descendant. There wasn't any doubt about her being a genius. Losing her in an admission battle would be a colossal loss to his clan. On the other hand, Master Antero of Arcane Wizardry Peak was smiling stupidly. He looked as if he was a man from the slums who had found a diamond in the middle of the street. One can imagine how happy that poor man would be. The same was the case of Master Antero, who found a diamond-like talent. Soon, the second layer around the fort was fully constructed, and in the next moment, the palms which were facing the sky changed their direction. Now they faced the ground beneath them. It was the signal to unleash the Gamma layer skill, Flight of Phoenix. Whoosh! With a hot gale, the wings flapped furiously, and the big burning bird descended. It flew downwards. XYR took a deep breath and braced himself, but the phoenix didn't hit him and missed the icy layer by hair's breadth. It ascended and then descended, but once again, it missed the layer by a hair's breadth. The spectators became curious. Is she not able to control it? What is the meaning of this? Is she playing with him after being played by him for so long? Some numerous questions and theories started to float within the gigantic group of disciples. A resounding buzz loomed until the same guy spoke. Again. She is building momentum and trajectory to increase the amount of power packed behind the initial impact. I heard from an old outer disciple that the more powerful the impact, the more damage the skill will cause. The onlookers gulped, and some licked their lips. The atmosphere changed. They felt waves of heat burning their face, and in the next second a cool freezing gale hit them, negating the burning effects. The phoenix circled in the sky 10 times, and with each complete circle, its speed rose. Ravina stared daggers at XYR and her hands fell. Kia! With a deafening cry, the phoenix took its flight. The watchers watched as the giant bird became smaller and smaller the higher it went. And in that moment, the flight of the phoenix ended and it came down like a devastating meteor. Brrrr. The sound of fire fluttering by air could be heard from far. A cold sweat ran down from Xyr's temple, and the disciples from the Naran continent looked worried. There were Gale Arms, Shifa Pista, Argus Waska, and even Zulfi Dimitri looked at the phoenix with a side eye. It looked as if the sun was falling from the sky. However, their hearts were slightly soothed when they turned their gaze to the prince of Bloodfang Kingdom. The werewolf prince was smiling. They were unaware of the reason behind his smile. Was he sure of Xyr's victory, or was he just smiling because the show was entertaining? Regardless of both, they felt ease deep inside their chest. If the prince is smiling, why should they worry? That was the mentality of Bloodfang members. They have become fanatics. The phoenix came down astonishingly fast as a lightning bolt, and was about to hit the layer of Winterfort spell. Bomb! With a loud bang, the platform shook, and the flight of phoenix successfully hit the Winterfort, the destructive offensive skill against the impregnable defensive spell. A show of martial cultivator against martial sorcerer, a fight of true geniuses. A clash of native and foreigner. Strange, how many phrases could fit the current scenario? The impact was large and powerful. Shunny, think you should take a look at. With a numbing noise, the first layer of Winterfort collapsed. The phoenix was not budged at all and went straight for Xyr. Bang. However, there was another layer and a large thick wall of ice between the phoenix and Xyr. The burning bird had no other choice but to make its way to Xyr by destroying these obstacles. Shun. Within a few more seconds the last layer was destroyed as well, and the phoenix's beak hit the thick icy wall, the last piece of defense that hinders the phoenix. The phoenix shook its head and flapped its wings. A crack appeared on the thick wall. Xyr, who was at the center of the fort, was forced to take a few steps back. More and more cracks appeared on the wall. On the spiritual tree, Master Bisma opened her mouth. Looks like the flight of phoenix is stronger than Winterfort. Out of everyone here, I would be the first one to joy if what you said was true, replied Master Aksama in Gale. Master Bisma was surprised. It seemed that there was more to that strange spell than she saw. The wall was about to be shattered by the phoenix, and it was at this moment when Xyr moved his hand. Burr. The other three walls that protected Xyr from other directions all moved. They were dragged by some unknown power. Bang bang bang. With three loud bangs, the three walls collided and merged with the damaged wall and created a broad, chunky, and compact wall of ice. Dom. The cracked first wall was destroyed by the phoenix, but a new set of three walls replaced it. Phoenix. Ravina yelled and poured more of her spiritual energy. There was no doubt that she was giving everything she had. A crack appeared on the new wall. The next Jinn of the cult gritted his teeth and uttered, "Come out, Cryosis." Xyr's ash-colored eyes stayed as lifeless as his bloodless white skin. The right side of his was completely frozen, and from that very side of his a dragon egressed. The dragon was white and tall with spikes around its neck, and everything it had in it had something to do with ice. It was one of the two martial spirits of Xyr. Cryosis, the glacier dragon. 5 orbs appeared behind his back and rotated. Xyr thrust his right arm in midair and a gushing cold mana hit the walls of the fort, strengthening them. Damn. The second wall was destroyed as well. The phoenix was simply too powerful, and the amount of spiritual energy and the time it took to form was just massive. However, Xyr was in no mood to lose. The image of the burning bird was as bright in his eyes as it was unreal. Damn. Third wall collapsed and the phoenix hit the last defensive wall, but now, the phoenix's size was shrinking a lot. Ravina in Gale was drenched in her own sweat as well. She poured the last bit of her strength and cried. Dom. The last wall was destroyed and Phoenix went straight towards Xyr. Boom. A giant explosion took place and the whole platform was covered by mist. Soon after, the mist slowly vanished and a figure could be seen in tattered clothes, blood dripping from his right arm as he said, "My turn now." The next Jinn of the cult stood firmly, or it may seem like that way. The Peak Masters looked at the glacier dragon and the 5 orbs revolving behind his back. A 5th grade spirit, how could he have a 5th grade with that much talent? Maybe, there is more to it, he is a mystery. That spirit is of ice attribute no matter how you see it, but that boy also used lava attribute. We can only wait and watch. The murmur of peak masters ended with that. The dreadful look of XYR in the eyes of people who witnessed the deadly attack. The young sorcerer came out. He successfully defended the attack, however, not unscathed. His clothes with printed dragons were in tattered form, not to forget that they were unique tier armament. His right arm was bleeding, but soon, icy mana came over and froze the blood and closed the wound. There were visible burns on his body as well. Ravina in Gale indeed launched one murdering attack. The mist that blurred the second silver platform slowly but completely vanished. The image of XYR in everyone's mind was carved as a tenacious sorcerer. Martial sorcerers are mostly long-ranged fighters, unlike martial cultivators. Be that as it may, there was some rarity in that. There were few exceptional sorcerers who could fight in close range, and those sorcerers are deemed as hazardous entities, and the man named XYR was one of those. XYR took a deep breath and looked at his opponent for a few seconds. He smiled. The lady in red was dumbfounded. She was sweaty, exhausted, and dried of spiritual energy. A horrific expression was painted on her beautiful face. Her rose-red lips were trembling. "I see, I can't believe it. How did he survive?" she mumbled. Ezra Zephyr spoke. His voice was loud as a rumble of thunder. Ravina in Gale of Ryan Continent has launched her attack, which was successfully defended by XYR of Naren Continent. Now it is XYR's turn to attack. He then looked at Ravina and said, "Do whatever you can to defend." Despite being severely wounded, XYR was rather calm. He shot a glance at Ezra Zephyr and uttered, "Master, I can barely stand. Allow me to go all out or I'll fall." The gigantic number of disciples gasped when they heard it. XYR didn't act tough and said what the truth was. "So he is really hurt?" "Yeah, I thought he was merely bleeding." Arcane Wizardry Peak is already ranked first. With this monster in it, the rank will not budge an inch in future. How come you are so sure he will join Arcane Wizardry Peak? What other good options do rare sorcerers have? Arcane Wizardry Peak is the only peak that can nurture a true genius sorcerer. I think you should take a look at. Numerous chatters loomed within the ranks of disciples as they looked at XYR. At that very moment there were some whose eyes were stuck on Ezra Zephyr. The werewolf prince of Bloodfang Kingdom nodded his head simply. The smile on his face was constant. Just below the second platform, another subordinate of Ezra Zephyr was present. He was not forgetting to observe the change in Ezra's facial visage. Seeing how his liege was satisfied with an outsider but was disappointed with him boiled his blood. He regretted his naive morals. "They gave me life, they gave me purpose, and I failed his expectations," he cursed himself. But no, not just himself but two others. One was his rival, the man who stole his liege's attention, and the other was the golden-haired glaive martial master who caused this blunder. There were only two thoughts in Zulfi's mind. One was how to gain his liege's trust back, and the other was how to kill the other two. On the floating tree in midair, the masters were curious. To think the 2 layers wouldn't hinder her flight of phoenix. "Master Aksama, you got some excellent descendants," said Master Albus. The old man simply shook his head. That skill sucked every bit of sparing spiritual energy within her body. The only remaining chi she has is essential to keep her alive. So she is as vulnerable as a newborn calf in front of a beast at this moment. All the praises deserve to be sung for the talent of that sorcerer boy. Not only he saved himself, but he also protected his straw hat, haha. It was at this point that everyone saw the hat connected to his neck by a string swinging in the air, untouched and unharmed. Master Antero spoke this time. "The attack drained Ravina in Gale, and I believe the Winter Fort spell also required a tremendous amount of spiritual energy, and he even managed to form 2 layers. Let's see what he'll do now. I assume that he'll cast a second circle spell at most, or perhaps third circle spell, if he is genius amongst geniuses." Hearing that everyone nodded, a calmness fell on the spiritual tree when a new voice came. "He'll cast a 6th circle spell." The voice came from the last branch. The heads of every peak master wheeled to where the 7th branch was, on which a man sat. He had a gloomy and defeated face, gray hair with white sideburns. "Why do you believe that, Master Shims?" asked Master Antero. Master Franco added. Learning gamma layer skill or spells of 5th and 6th circle is not easy. 3 months are short to even comprehend half of a single spiritual technique of that level. I bet my balls that he won't cast another spiritual technique of that level. In reply, the man put effort and stretched a fake smile. Just a hunch. The other peak masters didn't say anything and nodded their heads. The man was weakest out of 7 in every aspect, but still, there was a sign of respect in every master's eyes when they looked at him. Receiving permission from his master, the bloodless skin man raised his hand again. This time it was his left hand. Unlike the right hand of his, the left hand started to glow in red, then orange, and ended up with bright yellowing orange. Bubbles bloomed and popped countless times on his left arm, and the limb turned into a lava rod. The Straw Hat Man closed his eyes and took deep breaths numerous times, and opened them again. Come out, Pyrosis! Another dragon emerged from his left lava side. It roared as it shook its spineless head. Although it was spineless, it looked as if its skin was that of a frozen lava. Pyrosis, the molten dragon. At the same time, the orbs shone and revolved. Some changes occurred and 2 more orbs appeared. Combining all, the 7 orbs started to rotate. What? Master Antero flinched. 2 spirits in 1 martial master. Not only them, every single person who was not aware of XYR was puzzled and bewildered. Some were looking with their mouths agape, others whipped their eyes numerous times while the rest looked numbly. He clenched his hand into a fist and mumbled. 6th circle spell, Hellbow. A staggering amount of spiritual energy was released from his body and soon poured onto the ground 10 meters ahead. The spiritual energy, when reached at that spot, formed the shape of molten lava and gathered. What is he doing? Hey, is that another powerful spell? That's something even I don't know. Even the one who recognized Flight of Phoenix was at a loss now. Amidst the confused situation, Master Antero sighed and pressed his temples. What happened? By the amount of spiritual energy, I guess it's either 4th or 5th circle. Am I right? No. Master Antero shook his head and turned his head to look at the last branch. He looked at the old man with white sideburns and said. It's a 6th circle spell. What? Hell no. How is this possible? Master Franco cried. A small and soft chuckle came from the last branch. The old man sitting there said in a soothing tone. Master Franco, you bet your balls, remember? The giant man scratched his head and smirked in embarrassment. Haha, I did, but hey. Nobody accepted my bet, so it's not valid. He said it loudly and clenched his jewels gently to see if they were there or not. Master Antero, what is this spell about? Asked Master Aksama. He was worried about his descendant, although, in his Ryan continent, there were numerous descendants he had, but not any of them were as genius as Ravina in Gale. Even Mahi paled when compared to Ravina in Gale. Soon, the power that went inside that spot formed the shape of lava. The lava then combined and piled up, slowly changing the pattern into that of a crossbow. After the molten lava formed the pattern, it started to freeze. Barrel, limbs, riser, and flight groove were established in solid forms. Soon, the spiritual energy made a sting, an elastic string connecting the cam on a limb with a latch. Lastly, the mana created a bolt, a burning bolt with a spearhead. 1 meter, 2 meters, 5 meters, and at last the bolt size stopped increasing when it reached the size of 8 meters. The next Jinn of the cult then moved his hand, slowly and accurately, until he could see the figure of Ravina from the sight of a crossbow. The bolt was emitting a mind-boggling supply of heat. XYR secured the aim on his opponent and released the clenched fist. Go! PHRA 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 PHRA. The bolt was released and it tore the air and space as it moved. It was faster than the blink of an eye, much faster than that. The bolt was meant to kill, it was never meant to hurt anyone. A deadly move indeed, but then again, what was the attack of Ravina in Gale? That's right, it was also a deadly attack. An eye for an eye, deadly attack for a deadly attack. The bolt reached Ravina in Gale. The lady in red couldn't move, couldn't protect, and even couldn't gather time to close her eyes. All she saw was a bolt and strange air-cutting noise. I think you should take a look at. Snap. Huh. What happened? Was that a dream? Where is the bolt? The bolt suddenly vanished into thin air, and Ravina and Gale stood there safe and trembling. Thumb. At the same time, the genius young sorcerer fell unconscious. Ezra Zephyr simply turned his head above, to where the third branch of the spiritual tree was. May I ask the reason behind your interference, Peak Master? Wayo. So it was his ancestor who saved her. That's unfair. Yeah, he didn't stop when she poured everything in her attack. Master Aksama in return chuckled. So what if I interfered, you evil lad? Ezra Zephyr didn't say anything and simply looked towards a certain giant mountain in the middle of the sect. That was a threat, Master Aksama understood and laughed even more. At the same time, a figure landed on the second platform and took out a pill, stuffed it in XYR's mouth. It was not him but me who interfered, this fight was won by XYR. But Ravina is also an exceptional genius, losing her would be a waste, especially when a big war is right above our head. The one who said that was Master Antero of Arcane Wizardry Peak. Hearing that, Ezra Zephyr nodded and stayed quiet. The fight of the second silver platform ended and nobody would have believed that the man who was new and silent would win against the strong and menacing Ravina and Gale in such a domineering manner. Ezra Zephyr's eyes now turned towards the third platform, exactly what Zulfi Dimitri wanted him to do. But at that very moment, a crazy cry resounded, accompanied by a gigantic surge of spiritual energy. Surprisingly, the place it came from was first golden platform where the Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom was, and yes, the source of that huge wave of spiritual energy was none other than Drake Tubble. You bastard, I'll kill you. Drake growled, his eyes turned red in rage. Whoosh. Another gigantic wave of spiritual energy, the eyes of every person widened in shock. He broke through. Drake Tubble breakthrough from the 4th level of the core formation stage to the 5th level. Ah, he cried yet again, like a madman. Thush thush. One by one all the chains that held him broke, and now the formal number 1 unofficial outer disciple was free, ready to take his revenge. The previously assumed genius of this batch of spirit devouring sect broke free from the spell of Ezra Zephyr. The prince gave him a tentative look and smirked. You angry? These 2 words ignited the wrath of the man whose white clothes turned red from his own blood. Come out, Spurum. He growled. Whoosh. A giant wave of spiritual energy was released by him. The amount of the spiritual energy he emitted was startling. It surpassed Ravina in Gale by a large margin and was slightly above XYR's. Soon, a mysterious sword gradually revealed itself. The top came first, sharp and ghastly, then the blade was fully revealed, greenish with strange ancient runes on it. Small tornadoes and powerful gales circled the sword spirit as if the air was worshipping it. Some people were surprised when they witnessed the martial spirit of Drake Tubble. There was a certain Peak Master whose heart bled, a genius martial master with the spirit of the sword. That was the Master of Blood Slaughterer Peak. However, the number of people who were astounded was smaller than the number of people who pitied him. They were aware of the fact how ruthlessly the former number 1 was beaten and hung in midair by Ezra Zephyr. Not only that, his subordinates even managed to secure the top 10 positions. And even now, the unflinching and imperious demeanor of his assured them that no one can go against Ezra, at least, not from this bark. WHOOSSH. The spiritual energy of Drake Tubbles was windy and green. Even on the second platform, Ravina in Gale felt the oppression of wind. She then turned her sight to Drake's opponent, however, only a shock was waiting for her. Just who is he? She asked herself. Unlike the rest, the Prince of Bloodfang Kingdom didn't budge an inch. His entire body was covered with black lightning. The spiritual energy of his stood on equal grounds with that of Drake Tubble. Equal grounds? Impossible. Drake was driven by the deep urge of killing Ezra that rose from the antagonism that he accumulated throughout the 3 months. Apart from that, he had called his martial spirit and had a breakthrough. One more thing to keep in mind was that he was now 3 whole levels ahead of Ezra in martial prowess. But still, the mighty atrocious werewolf prince was unflinching. His martial spirit was not called, he was not in a state of frenzy, and neither did he break through, but yet, he was calm and domineering. You have to do far more than that to defeat me. Ezra chuckled, there was a mock behind the smirk. At the same time, a scarlet glow surfaced in Drake's eyes as his body jumped, appearing in the sky above Ezra Zephyr. His hands rapidly formed a series of seals as dark green spiritual energy began to flood the area behind him. Cyclone Ordnance, Triple Sword. The disciples who watched clicked their tongues and shook their heads in disappointment. Cyclone Ordnance, again. It's futile, I never thought that I'll see young master in such a state. However, those who were sane were aware that whatever is happening now is different. The amount of spiritual energy fused in the spiritual attack was 4 times higher. 3 comets appeared in the sky, surging with the dark green spiritual energy of wind attribute. Ezra created 3 pillars of spiritual energy, each 100 feet tall, dashed into the sky from the top of his head. Savage violence pulsed from the 3 pillars, and at closer inspection, one would discover the glowing silhouettes of 3 ferocious martial animals within the pillars. The moment the 3 spiritual energy pillars emerged, the 3 martial animal inside them hissed and roared, faintly resembling a dragon roar as a cruel and savage aura spread across the area. The eyes of countless disciples widened, evidently recognizing the technique. The technique the prince had used was also one of the high-grade gamma-layer techniques of the Outer Mountains' mystic demon library, the 8 Lost Dragons. Ezra smirked and mumbled. I'll consider this as your last wish, come. Drake Tubble made another sign, and with a loud banging sound, he clapped his hands. Merge. The dark green spiritual energy that made 3 different comets began to merge, and the 3 comets started to rotate. But there was a strange thing, the sword spirit of Drake, Spurum, moved and floated in the middle of the 3 comets. Soon, the 3 comets merged. Ezra glanced at the spiritual phenomena. FHOOSSHHH. Another giant gust of wind, and the 3 comets couldn't be seen anywhere, and instead, one gigantic sword floated in midair. The shape and color, everything of the sword resembled the martial spirit of Drake Tubble. However, the size was grand. The prince squinted his eyes and pondered. I've seen a similar scene somewhere? He recalled his memories, and his face became grave. He remembered that similarly, the Baron of Elfpatria merged his martial spirit with his attack and attacked Carlo or. But Carlo or easily obliterated him. I think you should take a look at. Drake Tubble signaled, and the merged attack of Cyclone Ordnance and his martial spirit descended. The prince paid no heed and launched the counterattack, and the 3 dragons made of black lightning roared and hissed. They marched to meet the attack of Drake Tubble. Ezra's smirk vanished for some reason. The sword came down, cutting air and space, the dragons caused deafening roars, and came together like a calamity. Drake already lost to that attack once, and now the same attack was coming. The disciples jolted on one another to see the outcome of the clash of titans. BBZZZZRRRRR. The mountain quaked as the 2 powerful attacks hit each other. Drake Tubble doesn't have any reason to live if he couldn't defeat Ezra. The humiliation he received later will never be washed. It will be written in the history of this batch in Spirit Devouring Mountain. All he wanted was the death of Ezra Zephyr. He cried and prayed to the upper realm for that. To his demise, his opponent was someone who had plans to destroy the upper realm as well. The 3 dragons bit the giant sword as Ezra uttered. You are nothing but a frog in the well. As the words of Ezra ended, spiritual energy in his body became chaotic, and the whole golden platform was destroyed by the bolts of black lightning. Boom. A loud bang, and the giant dark green sword shattered into specks of spiritual energy. Drake Tubble vomited blood and fell on his knees, dumbly staring at Ezra Zephyr. The prince gave him one last look and moved his hand. Ruhar. The dragons moved and passed through Drake and then vanished. What remained on the golden platform was Ezra Zephyr and the knees of Drake Tubble. The former so-called genius of unofficial Outer Mountain disciples perished. There was no one amongst the disciples who celebrated the victory. Some were sad because Drake was their leader, many started to fear the power of Ezra Zephyr, a few regretted that they couldn't join Ezra's side when they could, while the rest pitied that a rare genius like Drake Tubble died such a miserable death. SWWIISH. Another surge of spiritual energy was felt. It came from the third platform. Zulfi Dimitri finally defeated Paul Channa. There was a huge gash on Ladder's chest that spat out blood. Not long after, all the platforms concluded their battle and the official outer disciples were chosen. The Naren disciples took the top platforms together with those non-Shurian disciples that chose to follow Ezra. The injured disciples were celebrating their victory, and the disciples who stepped out of the platform felt an unwanted regret. They knew they left to keep their life, but still. They were also martial masters who aimed to walk on the path of martial prowess. However, there was one sparkle that shone brightly in their heart and reignited the extinguished flame. The name of that sparkle was Bloodfang Kingdom. The celebration continued until a voice resounded. "Attention!" Master Franco said. The disciples startled at first, but then corrected their posture. It was the time for them to enter a peak. "Congratulations, you all have officially become disciples of Spirit Devouring Sect. However, do not celebrate so soon, because the real hell has just started. This sect is run by the rule of jungle, the strong shall eat the weak, keep that in mind. And those who couldn't become disciple of our sect, there is another option available for you, isn't it?" Ezra jerked his head to see the peak master. Master Franco winked at him with a side eye. "If Supreme Leader is supporting him, then why shouldn't I?" he told himself. And lastly, the top 10 disciples will be given the reward accordingly, and they also possess the right to join any peak that they desire. Starting from first ranker. "Ezra, which peak do you want to join?" He stopped for a moment and continued. "My arcane wizardry peak is ranked first amongst the 7 peaks. I can guarantee you a broad future. Although my peak has all females, I will make you an exception," said Master Bisma of Colleen Evil Peak. "Young one, you have a great mind and controlled senses. Heavenly Fiend Peak is best for you," added Master Aksama. "Don't listen to them, Ezra, you have great movements, blood slaw dash." "Oh, shut up." Before Master Terror could complete, Master Franco stopped him. "Look at that lad's body, he's made for my divine demon body." Master Alba sighed. "You greedy leeches, he must have made his mind, let him speak for himself." Only then did the peak masters calm down and look at Ezra with thirsty eyes. The prince smiled and said, "I'll join Alchemic Rune Peak."